Good afternoon and welcome to the December 4th meeting of the Clearwater City Council sitting as the Community Redevelopment Agency. And we'll start today's meeting with an approval of the minutes from the October 16th meeting.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Time for citizens to be heard regarding items not on the CRA agenda. Are there any citizens that wish to speak on items not on the agenda? Okay, if not, let's go to new business. 4.1, please.
Approve the proposed 2024 Community Redevelopment Agency Board meeting schedule and adopt Resolution 23-03.
Good afternoon, trustees. Ann Lopez, interim CRA director. This first item that we have before you is the preparation of the proposed schedule for the City of Clearwater Community Redevelopment Agency meeting schedule for 2024. The CRA board meetings will be held monthly in City Council chambers, and these will begin promptly at 1 p.m. prior to City Council work sessions. These meetings will be posted on the city's website with separate meeting notices that will be provided by the city clerk's office, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, comments? Not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve item 4.1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Resolution
Yes.
first.
Resolution first, sorry.
One moment, Mayor, if I could.
That's okay.
Is it actually attached? Oh, that's fine. Okay. Resolution 23-03, a resolution of the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Clearwater, Florida, adopting the CRA 2024 meeting schedule, providing an effective date.
Okay, now do we have a motion?
Move to approve item 4.1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 4.2, please.
Approve the recommended changes to the Downtown Gateway Business Economic Recovery Grant Program and authorize appropriate officials to execute same.
At the June 12, 2023 CRA meeting, trustees approved the Downtown Gateway Business Economic Recovery Grant Program to provide a one-time economic recovery grant to assist business owners and tenants located within the Downtown Gateway that suffered an economic loss directly related to Streetscape Phase 3 project. This grant program was originally set up solely for businesses located on Gulf to Bay Boulevard, and staff has found that there were many businesses that suffered financial loss due to construction that did not meet minimum criteria that was discussed at the June 12th meeting. Staff's recommended changes to the program guidelines are as follows. Extending this grant program to all businesses on Cleveland Street and Gulf to Bay in the direct areas of the Cleveland Street construction. Businesses must either have been established prior to 2020 to set a financial baseline, or if not established prior to 2020, the business must prove a year-to-year financial loss in revenue during the time of construction. And for this grant program, because it's based on the construction, we would like to set a deadline of March 31st, 2024. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes.
No question, just a comment. Thank you, Ann, and thank you to the CRA for being so responsive to the needs. I know that while I drive down Cleveland Street during the whole, repairs and all that, the businesses on Cleveland Street, although the street was never closed completely like it was on Gulf to Bay, it was such a long and laborious process, and I know for a fact that it did affect those businesses. So thank you so much for being responsive and feeling that need.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a couple questions. I echo that, what Councilmember Teixeira said as well, but I have a little concerned about the phrasing, the direct area of Cleveland streetscapes. And so what does that mean if we extend it all the way down Cleveland to the direct area? I think it might be better to have, do you think you should name a cross street or something?
So the area for Cleveland Street went from, started at Missouri. We
Okay.
can add that in there.
Okay, to be specific?
To be specific to, we just did it, we wanted it to make sure that it was for those businesses that were impacted directly because of the construction.
Right, okay. So Missouri will be the cross street?
Yes.
And then who is wanting some assistance that does not qualify right now?
So we've actually received a total of 10 grant applications, and so far only one applicant has been awarded.
Mm-hmm.
We did find some that they weren't established prior to 2020, which was when construction started, so it was hard to be able to set a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've looked at is just different ways that we can kind of be fair across the board to everybody. And that's why we thought that as long as we can find a time frame during the construction where we can prove 1 year over the next of a loss, then we would serve that as well.
So it's more the years in business than it is the location?
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else? Anyone from the public wish to speak to this item? Okay, if not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve 4.2?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 4.3, please.
Amend the loan to grant agreement with 949 Cleveland Street LLC for the property at 943 Cleveland Street to extend the agreement to January 31st, 2024 for building improvements to implement the CRA Food and Drink Grant Program and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same.
At the October 29th, 2018 CRA trustee meeting, the trustees approved a time-limited grant program for property owners to support the establishment of new food and drink businesses that would be open on nights and weekends in the downtown core and Prospect Lake District areas of the CRA. On February 18th, 2020, the CRA trustees approved an applicant's proposal for a loan to grant in the amount of $187,632.50 for 949 Cleveland Street LLC to build out the vacant storefront and establish a coffee and dessert shop that will serve hot and cold drinks along with a wide selection of desserts. The applicants plan to complete the construction by February of 2021, but due to COVID pandemic, construction was delayed, and the trustees extended an extension. On February 2023, the CRA trustees approved a third extension to December of this year due to the requirements of replacing the roof, including structural engineering drawings, permitting, procurement, and subsequent installation. The applicant, who is now requesting a 1-month extension for 943 Cleveland Street, due to conditions, specifically the necessity for the roof replacement before the build-out can begin. There was also some complications with the previous tenant for the cafe space who withdrew, but they actually have a new leaseholder now. The general contractor for this location has targeted a turnover date to the owner at the middle of January, but they would like an extension through the 31st so that the tenant can complete their build-out. Staff is recommending amending this grant for 1 month to allow a final completion date of January 31st, 2024. And I have Jeanette Gonzalez here. She's with NM Residential. She'd be able to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, Ann. So when I read through all the extensions and stuff and their funding, it looks like this extension primarily impacts the business receiving the last 10% of their grant funds, right? They've received 90%.
Correct.
Okay, that seems fine. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public want to speak to this? If not, do we have a motion?
A motion to approve agenda item 4.3.
4.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 4.4, please.
Thank you, Mayor. 4.4 is an item that I added to the agenda. I'd like to ask the board's permission to send a letter to the Attorney General's office requesting guidance on a couple issues. As our new district is coming online in North Greenwood, there are couple things that have come up. Number one, I'm actually going to start with the second part of this, meaning the second part of the agenda item first, which is the ability to spend tax increment dollars from one district that are generated into the other district. So for example, if tax increment is generated in North Greenwood, the board needs to know if you can spend that money in downtown or vice versa. That's really important from a financial planning perspective as our new district comes online, and just also important operationally, so you guys know where your money can be spent. That issue, in my opinion, is not clear under today's law. There are certainly plenty of CRAs in Florida that have multiple districts, but they were operating and have been operating under earlier versions of the statute. And so with the statutory changes that are now in effect, it's not clear to me whether we can do this or not. And so I think this is one of those times where we're better off asking permission rather than forgiveness. And so I think it's best for us to send a letter. So that's half of it. The other half of it, along similar lines, is a question of under what circumstances, if any, we can offer a tax rebate or tax refund to projects not involving affordable housing. If it involves affordable housing, it's totally different, especially nowadays that the Live Local Act has been passed, so I'm kind of taking that out of it. But let's say you have market rate projects within the redevelopment area, or it may not be residential. It may be commercial projects, something like that that's not involving affordable housing. It does not appear to me that the current statute actually authorizes, or I should say, continues to authorize a tax refund or tax rebate. I don't believe that that is a tool that is still in the toolbox for other than affordable housing. However, that is an open question, and I think the board needs to know what tools are in the toolbox. So I'd like to get an opinion from the Attorney General's office, and maybe they'll say, yes, we can. Maybe they say, no, we can't. But either way, we need to know the answer. And so with the board's permission, I would send that letter on behalf of the CRA to the Attorney General's office. They're pretty good about giving us a response. It doesn't happen overnight. May take a few months, but they'll typically give a pretty detailed response, and so we'll have it straight from the horse's mouth. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Yes.
It might be too early to ask this question, but let's say the Attorney General comes back and says, yes, you can spend what money is allocated from one CRA district to another. Talk me through how that would happen. Would it be just up to the CRA staff to determine which direction the money goes and how much, or is that going to go through the CRA trustees whenever there's a crossover?
It will come to the trustees ultimately because it'll be part of the budgeting process and any sort of appropriation. It would be staff-led like most budget processes, but ultimately will come to the trustees either for approval, disapproval, or modification.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we all good with this?
Yep.
Okay. You got your marching orders. Thank you. Director's report.
I just have a very short director's report for today. We are starting to enter the holiday season, and with that, the CRA wanted to find ways to kind of showcase our businesses within the downtown CRA. So we decided to revamp the Coachman Perks program and turned it into holiday perks. So we have 24 businesses that have signed up that are providing perks throughout the holiday season. Those range anywhere from a gym membership to buy one, get one specials at local businesses. So more information on that, you can visit downtownclearwater.com/holidayperks. And the other one that I had, I just wanted to take a moment and thank everyone who showed up at the tree lighting ceremony on Friday. We did have a few little hiccups throughout the week, so I did want to just take this opportunity to really just thank those city employees that helped with that. So from General Services, Tom Wyke, Keith Farrington, Jewel Faith, and Brian Dort. From Parks and Rec, Paul Mack, Joel Donegan, Tom Lucas, Robert Hickman, and Chris Cook. From Traffic Engineering, Charles Stevenson and Sean Ford. And from the CRA, Eric Santiago, who really took the lead on providing the lights and getting the tree and decorations all throughout the downtown CRA. Those are really the only the updates that I had, aside from just wishing everyone a happy holidays.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I want to make a comment. First of all, the downtown looks beautiful. All the lights on the trees, wow, it really makes a difference. And wow, the event, the tree lighting event, I was blown away by the amount of people that were down there. You know, I'm used to Station Square Park, only so many people, but the whole park was active and was very, very nice.
I can't take credit for that. That was Parks and Rec, special events did that. I just gave them decorations and lights.
Mayor, I'd like to add Ann Lopez to that list of people to thank as well.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, being too humble, but it was a fabulous event. And yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised at how many folks attended and participated, and everyone had a great time. You know, I was there for over an hour, didn't hear one complaint about anything, which is just really unusual. This is awesome, it's an awesome park, it's an awesome time, it was really nice, so, you know, it was nice. Any other comments from the CRA or questions for Ms. Lopez? You all good? All right, good meeting, we're adjourning.
We can't start till 1:30, right?
I'm waiting for us to go down here, I don't know.
was, more to their members. Yeah. I can forward you what I got sent to my personal email, not my work email. Okay. Okay. Okay, yeah.
afternoon and welcome to the December 4th Clearwater City Council work session. We will start today's meeting with item number 2, which is under City Manager. 2.1, please.
Receive update on all ARPA, LFRF competitive grant programs and approve grant award recommendations for Cultural Affairs Nonprofit Grant Program.
It's a mouthful, right, Rose? Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Denise Sanderson, Economic Development and Housing Department. So in keeping with past practice, I'm speaking today on behalf of the City Manager's Office to provide an update on the grant and loan programs funded by American Rescue Plan Act's local fiscal recovery funds. These were receipted as general funds. And also to provide an update on the recently approved business incubator operated by Amplify Clearwater. So there are 6 programs to brief you on today. These are listed in your agenda memo. And the current status of funding for each program is detailed in the status update document also attached. It's this document that I'm going to review today. So showing in the overhead is an update that I'll provide in this order. It does differ from the document that you have. And the reason for that is I wanted to get to the Cultural Affairs program at the end because that, in fact, is got some funding recommendations for you to consider. So as you can see, with approval as you can see, 92% of the $7.7 million has been fully encumbered, and more than 65% has already been dispersed. And so we have a very high degree of confidence that will have full encumbrance by the end of 2024 and expenditure by the end of 2026. So that's great news. So I'll start first with the Affordable Housing Grants and Loans Program. As you recall, you allocated $3.3 million to this program. Economic Development and Housing is the administrating department, and we have 4 programs within that. Those are rehab loans and grants, emergency grants for homeowner-occupied dwellings, purchase assistance grants, and residential development loans. And as of November 4th, $2.7 million, or 82%, has been encumbered for 96 projects, 73 of which have been for emergency grants of up to $5,000 per grant. Of the $2.7 million encumbered, $1.8 million, or approximately 57%, has been dispersed. So on to education grants. The city clerk's office is the administrating department for this. They had an allocation of $750,000. The funds are fully encumbered, with all 5 awardees having received 50%, or $75,000 of their award. Each have submitted their first quarterly report. The second quarterly report is due January 15th. And upon submittal and successful completion of that report, I should say, the other half of that grant award, or $75,000, will be dispersed at that time. For the North Greenwood Community Grants, $1.4 million was allocated under this program, and the CRA is the administrator. All 25 grants or their grantees or their fiscal agent have received their full grant award and are submitting monthly reports in accordance with their agreements. For Pinellas Community Foundation, Economic Development and Housing Department oversees the agreement with PCF. We have a $1 million agreement approved in January of this year, and it is comprised of 3 elements, which is Phase 1, Phase 2, and administration. Within Phase 1, recall you had a $250,000 to one provider of emergency social services for relocation, case management, and system navigation. These were specifically earmarked for clients being dislocated from Capri Mobile Home Park. These funds were awarded by PCF to the Homeless Leadership Alliance on March 30th, and by July 31st, all of the funds were expended by HLA. HLA reported that 38 units from Capri are now settled in permanent housing, including houses, apartments, or other mobile home parks. And though there were about 90 sites at that park, only 38 family or family units sought any assistance. All were helped fully. For Phase 2, this is fully encumbered with $650,000 awarded to 5 providers of support to individuals and families with emergency housing and social services needs. The full proposals were submitted by July 21, and the committee meeting, of which I was a participant, was held on August 31st, and we selected the ARC Tampa Bay in the amount of $57,264, Boys and Girls Club $100,000, CASA, or Community Action Stops Abuse, $121,899, Hope Villages of America for $150,000, and Neighborly Care Network has 220,837. All but Neighborly Care has had a fully executed contract, and Neighborly Care Network's contract is pending. The administrative portion of that, you may recall, PCF has the ability to request up to $100,000 for actual cost of managing these grant programs with the awardees. For Amplify Clearwater, Council approved the agreement at its August 17, 2023 meeting, and by August 22nd, Amplify issued a call for applications. 24 were received by the deadline, and 10 were accepted into the program's first cohort, which launched on October 5th. The 10-week course guides the growth stage of businesses through deep evaluation of their current operations and matches them with the tools and resources they need to optimize their operation and scale toward their goals. Second cohort planning for this is for launch during the second quarter of 2024. And so finally, the Cultural Affairs Nonprofit Grant Program. This is a $1 million allocation, and the Cultural Affairs Division within the City Manager's Office is the administrator. To date, all funds have been encumbered pending your approval of today's list of grantees in the second round. The round one approvals of $571,150 were dispersed to awardees between June 15th and June 28th of this year, and the round two application cycle opened on July 20th with a submittal deadline of September 30th. In August, Creative Pinellas hosted a grant writing workshop specifically geared toward this program. 8 attended that event, and though turnout was fairly low, it should be noted that the city initiated a pretty robust marketing campaign and communication strategy that included direct mail to those who did not receive funding in round one. Prior to the round two deadline, 18 applications were received requesting more than $2 million in funding, and of these, 4 were deemed ineligible. So the committee reviewed 14. And of those 14, the 9 highest scoring applicants were recommended by the committee for funding in amounts ranging from $9,500 to $180,000. These organizations and the recommended funding amounts are listed in your agenda memo. And so I'll be happy to take any questions, and representatives from the varying departments are here as well.
Any questions or comments? Yes.
I appreciate that overview. That's great. We've got great numbers about the amount of money that's been distributed and some that's pending. Because these are so many great programs, I was thinking, like, over the next 6 or 8 months, as people complete their projects, if they want to come in and just give a 5 or 10 minute update on what they did. I know you said they file reports. Those are probably more financial reports?
They are, and you're referring to the PCF, or well, I guess some of the
grant
others,
recipients, yeah.
Yes, so I think the reporting requirements are likely different depending on the grant program, but
just like, how did you do, what was the response in the community and all that kind of thing? Good. And then the only other comment I have to make is about those, the arts grants is that, well, we have about $1 million, we have over $2 million in grant requests, which is fantastic. But I think what that tells us is that there's great interest in the organizations out there to partner with the city to bring a whole bunch of diverse art, creative outlets and opportunities in our community. So I think it would be worthwhile in the future to look at other ways to set aside funding to keep these kinds of things going, especially when there's such interest out there and capacity. I mean, they have the interest capacity, they just need a little more capacity funding, partnership. So that's all the comment I had.
Yes.
For the Amplify Incubator, it's listing one project. Does that mean that the incubator is helping one person, or the incubator itself is the project?
the incubator itself is the project and the way that we're calculating that. I guess it's really done by contracts. Which contracts do we have? And so that's a single contract with Amplify directly.
Yeah, they picked, what, 10 people out of the 20 or so that applied?
Correct. 10 were accepted into the cohort.
First cohort.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
This is eligible for consent.
Consent?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Economic Development and Housing, 3.1, please.
Declare surplus for the purpose of donating to Habitat for Humanity of Pinellas County for a certain real property located at 406 Vine Avenue.
Good morning, or good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Dylan Mayu, Economic Development and Housing. City-owned property located at 406 Vine is .115 acres and is designated with medium-density residential zoning. Vine was acquired by the city as a consequence of a tax foreclosure in 2010 and is currently listed on the city's affordable housing inventory list. When the city acquired the property, it was encumbered by title issues caused by the prior owners. Assistant City Attorney Michael Fuino processed a quiet title action on behalf of the city. Because that process is complete, we are now able to transfer the property with clear title. On September 6, 2023, I completed staff opinion of value, yielding a fair market value of $83,350. In accordance with the city's procedure to surplus and disposition property on the affordable housing inventory list, staff released a surplus notice to the list of interested developers on August 16, 2023. Per the procedure, developers on the list were given 15 days to respond to the notice. 3 developers responded within the response window: Habitat for Humanity, Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services, and Affordably Lavish Foundation. Of the 3 respondents, Habitat for Humanity scored highest on the scoring rubric due to the fact that the property is in the North Greenwood CRA. An additional opportunity for responses was provided on October 13, 2023. Staff advertised a request for letters of interest for the acquisition and development of Vine Avenue in accordance with relevant state statute 163.380. On November 14th, the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board heard this item and approved the recommendation for the donation of 406 Vine to Habitat for the development of a single-family home. Considering all responses and the recommendation from NAHAB, staff is recommending the donation of the property to Habitat for Humanity for the deed-restricted use of affordable housing, which aligns with Objective 2.4 of the city's strategic plan. Per their response, Habitat anticipates vertical construction of a single-family home will commence within 6 months, and the sale of that home will occur within 12 months of the date of acquisition. Habitat's response also highlighted their commitment to incorporating energy-efficient features and EV charging capabilities within the home. Be happy to address any questions.
Any questions or comments? Anyone? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. 3.2, please.
Accept the 2023 Local Housing Incentive Strategy.
Thank you, Chuck Lane, Economic Development and Housing Department. As you all know, the city is a recipient of State Housing Initiative Partnership Program funding. Among the many obligations that accompanies this, we're required by state statute to assemble annually an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. It used to be every 3 years, now it's an annual process. The committee's role is to evaluate land use regulations, ordinances, our comprehensive plan, and any other city policies or procedures that might affect the cost of housing or might impact a developer's decision as to whether or not to build affordable housing. The committee makes recommendations for policy changes, and these recommendations are written into the city's Local Housing Incentives Strategy Report. The committee is ultimately tasked with updating this report annually. Because the committee now meets annually with this process, we're seeing fewer changes to that report with each year. The committee is required by state statute to evaluate 11 specific criteria, and they can also recommend strategies and incentives outside of those 11 required topics. Throughout the report, the committee chose to make minor language changes to insert more affirmative language into the report. Other than that, there were really no substantive changes to the committee's recommendations under the 11 required criteria. There was some great discussion at each of the 4 committee meetings, and the committee did make some edits to the report, and I'll summarize some of the more pertinent ones briefly. The committee made some changes to recognize the Live Local Act. That, of course, is a piece of legislation that is intended to encourage affordable housing. They entered a statement in the report that says everyone deserves a safe, affordable home. They added language to reinforce the need for affordable housing to be built near transportation hubs, major employment centers, and mixed-use development. Previous reports have encouraged adaptive reuse projects to include repurposing old churches, school buildings, hospitals, train stations, warehouses, factories, etc. The committee modified the strategy to specifically include hotels, office buildings, and malls. And this additional language is intended to align with the development rights provided through the Live Local Act. As in previous years, the committee encouraged staff to increase marketing efforts to educate developers about incentives that we provide. And lastly, the committee asked staff to evaluate whether staffing levels are adequate to forward the committee's recommendations. State statute requires that the AHAC approve the updated report. This occurred on Tuesday, November 14th, by unanimous approval by the committee. Following approval of this item, the committee will automatically sunset. State statute requires that within 90 days, the city updates its local housing assistance plan to incorporate the incentives identified by the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee that the city desires to implement. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions or comments?
Hi, Chuck. Thank you for all the work. I sat on that LHAC and, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and worked on this and really enjoyed the work and the notes that were provided for all the meetings. I don't know if you've read them, but they really nailed all the nuance of the discussion, which was great. But I wasn't able to be at the very last meeting, which was, I think, in early November. Was it November 14th? I was at the opioid thing, but there weren't notes included in there for that meeting. But I'm sure it was just, we were finalizing the recommendations.
At that meeting, we really, the committee approved the report without making any additional changes.
Okay, that's what it sounded like from the previous meetings. But I had just a couple of follow-up questions. If we look at the legislative text, those highlights that you went over, 2.2 says, annually assess the financial, legal, and administrative feasibility of reducing, refunding, or redefining the cost of impact fees or permitting fees, all that stuff, so that they're with the goal of being on par with other municipalities in Pinellas County. So if the direction is to do that annually, my question is, what would be the best month to do that? What can we expect to have a report like, hey, we're in alignment with most of the municipalities in Pinellas and or the county?
I don't know the answer to that. I'll communicate that to the NAHAB, the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I'll coordinate with the Planning and Development Director on when we think that might be the best,
Okay.
a good time to do that.
Okay. And then the next one was continue to provide allowance of density flexibility for affordable housing developments. It says, and implement city council comprehensive plan policy, and we've got some numbers, to allow one accessory dwelling unit by providing corresponding standards in the Community Development Code. So what we're talking about there is the comprehensive plan, right, which is up at the state to be looked at right now, and then we change the Community Development Code. Is that the sequence? Okay, just wanted to confirm that. That's the sequence. Okay. And we can expect that, like, middle of the year to start having those conversations of next year? By the time the state comes back with a Clearwater 2045? Yes? We're working on some ADU changes. Okay. Just wanted to confirm the sequence. And then the 12.1 that follows underneath that, this is continue to allow and promote adaptive reuse involving the conversion of surplus and or outmoded buildings, including, you talked about old churches, school buildings, hospitals, train stations, all that business. And my question there is, especially with the Live Local, and we're so highly developed that we need to really look at redevelopment. And so the word that says, and you did, comment that we talked a lot about the nuance of the words, but continue to allow and promote adaptive reuse. And I'm like, what does promote look like? Because when I think of 3 churches that I know of, First United Methodist, St. Paul's, Unity Church off Nursery Road, that have been, that are being reused for something other than housing. What does promote look like as we go forward, do you think?
That's a really good question, because when these projects come to us, they're not our projects. We're not creating them, we're not recommending them, they come to us.
Right.
And at that point, it's a matter of us coordinating with the owner to try to find a way to get to the finish line on these types of things. So it's not something we're initiating, because we don't own the properties.
But if we're going to promote that the city is open for those kinds of partnerships, and that's what we'd like to see in our community for adaptive reuse, maybe that's part of the brochure that we're working on.
Yeah, and the committee has talked a lot over the last couple of years about marketing and us trying to step up our efforts with that, and we're going to try to meet that request of the committee.
Okay. And then it's on the second page of the legislative text, C.26. The AHAC found that affordable housing in the city of Clearwater should be incentivized to promote incorporation of affordable housing into all non-affordable housing developments. And we had a number of conversations about that wording, because every development is affordable to someone, right? And so what do we really mean by that? So I thought we struck the non-affordable part of that, and we had said incorporation of affordable housing into all housing. I mean, it's still the same kind of nuance, right? Housing's going to be affordable for some people, and, you know, so do we want to say mixed income housing? That's just, you know, part of it. And then I think on page 56 and 71 of this, the local housing incentive strategy update is where we talked about part of that. In response to the change to existing principle, the AHEC discussed and the consultant confirmed the definition of affordable housing to be included in the 2023 LHIS report. So we have it struck from that page. Incentivized to promote incorporation of affordable housing into all housing developments. So I just wanted clarification on that.
Some of the discussion we've had with the committee about that is cautionary, because we can't require that. If we require that as a municipality, we're required to pay the offset cost
Right.
to the developer.
Right.
So we have to be very careful about this
Right.
language.
But I think we had incentivized. So incentivized is different than required. So we incentivize it is okay. I'm okay with incentivizing.
I believe so. And I'll check exactly what I believe this is the verbatim, the wording that the committee accepted.
Okay.
If it's not, it's a typo on my part.
Okay.
I'll double check that for you.
And then and I just wanted to draw the council's attention to, there was a lot of discussion, well, there wasn't any pushback, but there was discussion about, under our affordable housing vision, to add the word accessible into a diverse supply of housing that is safe, accessible, affordable, sustainable, energy and cost efficient, all that stuff. But we deliberately added accessible because we've got so many elderly that are entering our homeless or housing compromised populations, and they need to have, you know, wheelchair accessible, more mobility accessibility in the housing options that they have. We're finding that that's a huge challenge. So that was definitely brought up in that meeting.
These language changes you're referencing, they're all shown and struck through an underlined format in the document. So it's easy to see what they changed from last year to this year.
It is. And then I had just one on page 71 that was 71 was, and again, you know, when you're showing this to the council for our approval, and the deadline is the end of December, there's not a lot of time, you know, to go back and change it, but under the additional land development code, it's interesting that we've got some stronger language, provide direct and visual access, that continue to incentivize developers to address recommended design standards for affordable housing developments, because we want high-quality housing developments throughout our city. So they include things like provide nighttime outdoor illumination for safety, use landscape standards and buffers to screen nuisances and separate public and private areas, but it's got consider play areas when developing family housing. And I'm like, well, that's consider. I mean, that's not a do it, right? I mean, somebody can say, yeah, I considered it, but I'm not going to put it there. But we really would like it to be there, especially for multi-family housing. So that just struck me as kind of a weaker word.
The document is intended to create incentives. It's not intended to create rule.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all. But I'm glad we've got, you all did really great things with that group, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Chuck.
Anything else on this? All right, good job. Appreciate it. Human Resources 4.1, please.
Authorized agreements with Baycare Urgent Care and Life Extension Clinic, doing business as LifeScan Wellness Centers for employment-related health care services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Today, I come to ask for authorization agreements with Baycare Urgent Care LLC and Life Extension Clinics Inc., DBA LifeScan Well Centers for employment-related health services in a cumulative amount of $465,000 with 3 one-year renewal options pursuant to FRP 5323, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same with consent. On August 1st, 2023, request for proposal for 5323 employment-related health services was issued. 3 responses were received and evaluated by a committee consisting of representatives from Clearwater Fire and Rescue, Clearwater Police Department, and the Human Resource Department. Baycare Urgent Care was selected as a pre-employment physical provider. Department of Transportation, DOT, random DOT post-accident, and citywide reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol testing for non-CFR and CPD employees. The services to be provided by Life Extension Clinics, Inc., DBA LifeScan Wellness Centers included pre-employment and annual physicals for police and fire rescue personnel. Both CFR and CPD have utilized LifeScan for several years due to the comprehensive diagnosis and testing that they provide. The Fraternal Order of Police's negotiated agreements included the requirements for LifeScan services for officers and supervisors. LifeScan physicals include a performance-based fitness evaluation that is evaluated against prior year's results. The ultrasound component of LifeScan's physicals have been credited with identifying significant conditions that were able to be addressed early and possibly preventative permanent health conditions. The cumulative amount breakdown of the $465,000 would be $140,000 for Baycare, and LifeScan would be $325,000. Each one of these authorizations includes 3 one-year renewal options. Is there any questions?
Okay, questions or comments, anyone? No? Consent?
Yes.
Thank you very much. 4.2, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Approve the Evergreen Implementation Strategy regarding the classification compensation study.
These were some positive results here. They need to be,
Good afternoon, Crystal Riles, Human Resources Assistant Director. I wanted to give you a quick overview of Clearwater's classification compensation history before I introduce you to our consultant from Evergreen. In 2019, the city implemented our last classification compensation study by the third-party consultant. In 2021, the city increased the minimum wage on permanent employees to $15 an hour. In 2022, the Human Resources Department completed an internal compensation study and adjusted salaries and pay grades for over half of our employees. Since 2019, we have aimed to be at the 50th percentile among comparators. We are currently at the 45th percentile and continue to struggle to attract and retain employees. Now I'd like to introduce you from Evergreen Solutions, Carl Fuchs.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager. My name is Carl Fuchs. I'm a senior consultant with Evergreen Solutions. And so we've been working on a contract for about 9 or so months, I guess, from the beginning until now, going through the compensation and classification study. And so let me just meander my way through this. So overview, what we're going to go over with is some of the study goals, what we set out to do initially, our project phases, so what we've actually been doing for the last several months, some of the employee meetings that we, some of the big takeaways that we got there, current system findings, market results, some of the recommendations that we've made so far, and then the city's adoption of those recommendations and results. So again, study goals, we want to review the current compensation system to ensure that there's an internal and external equity. We survey some peer organizations, and I'll get into that a little bit more here in a moment, to ensure that there's an appropriate external equity as well. And our goal, which does align with our Evergreen's mission statement, as well, is to make sure that the city is in the best position possible for the recruitment and retention of quality employees. So our phases here, we started off phase 1 was our initial kickoff. I think this actually happened in the beginning of the year. By the time we got to data collection, we were probably into the March, April timeframe. We came out and did an on-site here in May. And then since May, we've been doing all of the rest of these phases here. So we've been going over a data review. We've been going through, the market survey that we sent out to the comparative and comparators and competitors in the labor market here in Clearwater and in Pinellas County in the greater Tampa Bay area. And then we've put together what we think are some decent solutions and made some recommendations, and there's been some level of a conversation that exists between HR and the city manager's office and myself to ensure that, what I'm doing on my end is aligning with the strategic goals and the objectives of the city in its entirety. So when we came out, again in May, we did some employee engagements. I'm not going to read all this slide to you, but I'll kind of go over it in a high level as to what it is that we actually do. So we came out in May and we engaged in some conversations with employees. So we provided an orientation for different employee groups, and what we seek to do in those engagements is to be able to have conversations with different sectors or different segments of the labor force that is here in the city of Clearwater. And so we sort of segregate them so that, you're not sitting directly next to your boss when we're having these conversations. And what we like to garner out of these is some of the things that aren't going to be necessarily immediately evident through data collection. So what is working well in the city? What are some things that, we're going to make a recommendation back that, hey, these are some things that you all should probably continue doing. And then we're going to look at some of the areas that the employees brought up that might be areas that they feel could need some improvement. And again, I guess the big takeaway here is that all of this is perceptive in nature from the seat of that employee or that group of employees. We understand that. We just feel like it's important for us to make sure that everybody is understanding that this is where we're operating from a perceptive nature so that we're targeting those things as we move forward through our study. There's another part of our outreach that is called our job assessment tool, and so what we do is that's essentially a survey that we send out to employees, and with that survey we get some direct feedback as to what folks are actually spending their time doing. What that allows us to do is be able to look at things from an internal equity standpoint and to ensure that when we are racking and stacking and creating a hierarchy essentially for those classifications within the city, that they make logical sense. And then additionally, when we're doing our market survey and we're polling other peers, that we want to make sure that an administrative assistant in the city of Clearwater is doing something very similar to what an administrative assistant is doing in any of the other organizations that we polled. From the information that's on here, we did get a very good turnout on the job assessment feedback. We got a really good response from that, and again, the employees of the city were very forthcoming and very welcoming for us as well. So that was all done very, very well. Some of the positives that came out of that, those employee meetings, was the culture. I think a lot of the vast majority of the employees here feel like that the culture that they're a part of is a good thing. They like being a part of this organization. And that the people that they work with, they see as family in many cases, and so that's a very good starting point, to be honest with you. The environment, employees working in a place where they either grew up or where they currently live, where they're contributing to the aesthetics of the city. It's mentioned, and I'm a resident of Pinellas County as well, but the beautiful beaches, and to be able to take some level of pride in making sure that those things are beautiful and can be enjoyed by visitors of the city as well. Having a solid schedule and being able to have a little bit of flexibility was something else that was mentioned that's a benefit. And then lastly, employee health benefits and all of the ancillary benefits that exist there. Specifically highlight the employee health clinic was something that was brought up, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute when we get to benefits, but a uniquely positioned benefit and something that was seen from a positive aspect of employees. Some of the areas of concern was the perception of progression and how individuals felt like that in some times moving into that first tier of managerial kind of area, that they would be taking a pay cut, and so it wasn't financially advantageous to take promotions. And so that dissuaded a lot of people that were probably very capable and competent to do those things. It dissuaded them from seeking out those promotions. And so that was something that we looked at a little bit as we went through and made some recommendations here. Salary, again, perceptive nature, and I'll tell you that probably not this isn't an unknown to you, but public sector folks tend to look all over the place to see how do I compare against the county, this city, that city, whatever it is. And so people had a perception that they were being paid less than what their counterparts in other organizations were. And then lastly, classifications. There was some folks that expressed that there was some disparity between what they do and what their classification title is, even what their classification might do in a different department. And so it was important for us to, ensure that folks knew that, while we were here, we were doing a comp and class study, that we weren't engaging in a workload study. And so that was something that was a takeaway there, but it was mentioned, so I feel compelled to share that with you all as well. Current system findings. The system is really good. It's very solid. It has very definitive boundaries. All pay grades do encompass all of the classifications within the city. They're adequately spaced out. There's an appropriate range to them, which allows for progression. We tweaked that a little bit as we went through and made some recommendations, but all things, all in all, pretty well suited for a starting place. Some of the weaknesses were that it only accounts for, as far as progression, it only counts for time and tenure. Tenure and classification, and then the pay plan hasn't, as Crystal explained, maintained its market competitiveness over the last several years, probably likely to do with more of the economic situation that we've been a part of, not so much as a result of the HR department. So as we went through and did our market survey, here are some of the targets that we looked at, here are all of the 21 peers that we looked at. So there's 14 cities, 6 counties, and then we looked at a water district as well. 18 of those, of the 21 that we asked to participate, 18 of those responded, 15 of them responded with benefits data. All of the responses were adjusted for a cost of living. So what we do is we bring all of those dollars, depending on where they come from, we bring them all back to Clearwater dollars, and what we want to be able to show is an accurate depiction of what an employee's buying power in the city of Clearwater looks like. So you'll see on this slide here that the cost of living factor in that far right column, some of them are ones, and those ones are for the peers that are inside of Pinellas County. So when they get outside of Pinellas County is when we started applying that cost of living index. We benchmarked 150 classifications, so that's what we looked at as a measuring stick for the pay plan as a whole, and we got 8 responses back on average for each one of those 150 classifications. Again, I would share with you that is a pretty healthy number of responses. When we see more than 5, that really lets us feel pretty comfortable with the data collection, and that there's not going to be an outlier that's going to push the numbers one way or the other. And so that, again, all good things. For the benefits summary, what we looked at were, again, the health insurance and some of those ancillaries, as they are shown here on the slide. And then lastly, I just wanted to go back and reiterate that the employee health clinic is a unique and valuable benefit that exists. I didn't see it anywhere else on any of the other markets that we surveyed, that was a thing that was offered. So again, I would keep going on that. So as I share with you here, where the benchmark positions stacked up with those comparators that we looked at, the comparators or competitors that we looked at in our market survey, I just want to first and foremostly point out that this is a look from the pay plan as a whole. This is not a measure of individual salaries or the movement of individual salaries necessary to achieve market competitiveness. This, again, is just looking at the pay plan as a whole. So a negative differential here shows that there's a lag between the city of Clearwater and what those 21 or 18 that responded market peers are. Again, so the average response pay range for the comparators that we looked at was just shy of 50%, and for the city of Clearwater, it's averaging just over 55%. The market position enables the city, with looking at the 75th percentile, it puts the city in a really good position to affect that recruitment and retention very positively. Again, some of the things that we heard through our outreach and discussions with the HR department was that there's a tough time recruiting for folks, that the recruiting pools have gotten smaller, things of that nature that, again, people not wanting to promote. So this really is going to benefit the city well as far as employee accession and retention as it would be looked at, and then also it's going to make the recruiting a little bit easier when you're not several dollars an hour shorter than the people that may be sitting very, very close to you. So compression analysis, I'm just going to go over this pretty the broad stroke of the brush here. So compression analysis, what we look at is relationship of individuals within a similar classification, and is there compression there that exists with their tenure, and then there's also a rank compression. So it would be, we would look at that from individual employee to their supervisor, or from that supervisor to their direct report. We have a sweet spot of about 80% where we would like to see that disparity. And for the most part, the city of Clearwater is doing very well in that realm. There were a couple of outliers there, and I did look into that a little bit deeper, and most of those outliers were specifically to very tenured direct reports and junior supervisors. And so that's going to, there is going to be an overlap there that exists, and that's what that looked like. But from a systemic perspective, compression isn't anything that was very concerning to us. So as we go through and look at some of the recommendations, what we really want to do is then provide an adjusted pay plan that is market responsive, that does keep the city competitive, with a consistent range spread that has range spreads that are consistent across the board with a similar consistent midpoint progression, and then reassign the classifications in the city to those pay grades so that it makes internal equity from an internal perspective, and then we place those employees on an individual basis into those pay grades based on a couple of different options that we presented to the city, and we got some insight back on that. And so whatever that compensation philosophy is the way that individuals will be put into that pay plan. So again, as we go back and look at the classification grade placement and the comparison, so again, this is the general, this is a look at classifications overall. This isn't necessarily responsive of individual salaries there, but what we're looking at here is the difference between where classifications sit today and where they will sit post-implementation. So as you see that at the minimum of the grades, there's about a 17% increase, and then it creeps up a little bit as we go to the midpoint and the maximum. And the reason that exists is that we made a recommendation to broaden the pay band a little bit to 60%. And what that enables the city to do is to be able to have a little bit more growth in those classifications for those individuals that, there are people that are very comfortable being where they are, and there are individuals that want to, ascend to the top and that they're going to move through pay ranges. And so what this does is it's kind of a good median here, where it does provide some growth for the folks that stay in their same classification for a long period of time, and it also is responsive, from a progressive standpoint when folks are ascending that rank system. So here we're going to go through some of the options that were presented as recommendations. So bring to minimum, essentially what we do is we've created this new pay plan, and then what we're going to do is we're going to assign different classifications to our respective pay grade, and then what we do is we take any individual employee who is not at the minimum of that new pay grade, and we bring them into that pay grade at the minimum. Typically it's significantly cheaper, as you can see on here, than some of the other options. The downside of this is if there was a compression issue that did exist, this is going to exacerbate that. And if there wasn't a compression issue, this is likely going to create one, depending on, especially when we're looking back and saying we're moving the pay plan 17% to bring people to the minimum, that could have a significant play there. So, I do want to kind of emphasize that, yeah, it could be good, but there are some drawbacks to that. Similarly, the class and tenure parity, essentially they're the same thing. One looks at time and classification, which is the current philosophy that exists here in the city now, and then the other looks at overall tenure within the organization. Again, there's some, value that's placed on either time and classification, so how much experience do you have doing what it is that you do, and then the other looks at a value on time in the organization. What's your institutional knowledge look like? All of those things, which, it's basically a benefit of loyalty to some degree. Those costing options are a little bit more than what we look at in the bring to minimum, and the reason why is that we're pushing people further into those pay ranges based on what that parity looks like. So some of the, downside or drawbacks, I guess was the appropriate term, for those parity options is that you can have one or the other, right? So the current classification or compensation methodology, what we're looking at is that you're providing value solely based on someone's time in their current classification. So that institutional knowledge has no value. And so that can be, a drawback for somebody who's been here for a long period of time and has moved into a new classification, that all of that time that they've been here beforehand is now falls off the radar and that they're being paid commensurate to how long they've been in their current class. On the flip side of that is that you're looking at solely tenure. And so the drawback there is that if an individual was maybe in the city, same thing, for a long period of time, and that they've recently moved in, ascended into a new pay grade, what we're going to look at then is their entire time of tenure, and so when they move into that new classification, they're going to be paid disproportionately greater than their peers in that same classification who don't have as much tenure within the organization, but might have, far more experience in that particular classification. So those are some of the drawbacks there as we look at that. And then what our recommendation was to provide this hybrid parity, and so what this hybrid parity does is it looks at both organizational tenure, provides, a 3-to-10 ratio on that, for employees that have any sort of tenure in any classification other than the one that they're currently in, and then a 1-to-1 ratio for the time spent in their current classification. And so again, it's a hybrid. We come up with a hybrid year plan when we do that, and then we move employees into their pay grade based on that hybrid year. It is sort of the middle ground on cost, but what the good thing to take away from this is that it works the best for the most, and so understanding that there's not necessarily, unfortunately for me, there's not a perfect solution that I can come here and deliver you all that, makes the best sense for everybody, but I would say that this probably makes the best sense for somewhere between, 85 to 95% of the employees in the city, and it has the greatest level of utility and value. The downside to the hybrid parity is that it doesn't take into consideration, nor do any of the other parity options or any of the bring to minimums, it doesn't take any consideration into outside experience. But what I have done is I'm going to provide the HR department with a hiring calculator that we have. So what we'll be able to do is use the same methodology for new hires into a particular pay grade based on their outside experience if it's deemed fit, and that's what the HR staff decides to utilize. In addition to our recommendations on the classification move and that parity option, there was a 1.5 general wage increase that was given to all employees. So essentially what this does is it allows all employees to get something. It allows them moving into the new calendar year that there's going to, there's going to be a little bit of a response based on the data that we collected. We collected in the beginning part of the summer or the late end of the spring. And so as that data ages, this is a nice little bump moving into the next calendar year to, again, maintain that competitive edge that has been sought after by the city. And so in addition to that, there's a cost benefit here that's broken down. And so those are some of the things that, I'm not going to read the slide to you all. I don't think we want that. But, there's a bit of a back and forth there, so it does make economical sense as well. For the adoption of the recommendations as far as the market placement goes, again, I've talked to this a little bit, in contrast to finding the 50th percentile and being average. What this allows the city to do is kind of lead the edge on this. And again, as I mentioned to the staff and was brought to my attention very clearly when I was here on outreach, is that, this is the third largest municipality in the Bay Area. And so I think taking those things into consideration and looking at the things that are available to the citizens in the way that you attract tourism into the city, this is a commensurate positioning with the size of the city and the benefit, or and all of the things that are provided here, not just to the staff of the city, but also, to the folks that come here, that they're, the services that are provided are going to be better suited as a result of that. So adoption of the recommendation, again, I've talked about this a bit. The pay plan is going to have 5% increase from the midpoint. The reason that we look at the midpoint is that way it's closer to 5% on the polls rather than doing a 5% at the minimum. It's a significantly higher percentage on the top end. So we look at moving things 5% from the midpoint. Again, that 60% range spread allows for healthy movement based on a 25-year parity is the way we've kind of assessed this through the course of one's career. And so, again, this follows the recommendations that we provided. It will maintain a market responsiveness. There's part of that we will be giving as far as our recommendations on maintenance of this plan as well. And so it allows for folks to move very, very consistently through their range, on their pay grade, or again, as they ascend to higher pay grades, that same progression exists for them as well. So again, looking back at the, I know this says compression, and I told you that wasn't a significant issue, but based on that 25-year parity, what we're looking at, again, is the hybrid methodology, which I explained earlier. Again, it does have the broadest reach for the broadest amount of classifications and employees in the city. And it, from our perspective, we feel recommending that is the best answer for the city. That I feel like through the course of our conversation, that's been agreed upon by the staff that I've interacted with, and so those are things that are very important. Again, valuing institutional knowledge and experience and effective promotions as a result of having folks being able to feel like that they're not taking a pay cut by adding more responsibility to their plate is a very, very good thing. And then again, as time goes forward, if there is going to be a more targeted compensation methodology that exists, it can be aligned very, very well to the pay plan that exists here, and it's also situated very well to continue to be market responsive going forward. And again, we really feel strongly about that hybrid methodology being the best plan going forward. And so as we go through this, there are some limitations that were placed on this, and so looking at a cap for employees, that their salaries won't increase beyond $20,000 annually on a 20/80 scale. So we looked at that from an hourly perspective. And the reason that we decided on a dollar amount rather than a percentage amount is that the folks who are going to be more significantly impacted on the lower end of that pay scale are not going to be hindered by a percentage, where that would have, could have significantly higher dollar amount associated with it for folks that are higher in the pay scale. So sitting on a dollar number was more equitable as we saw going forward. And so, again, from the concurrence of the staff, that is something that we made that adjustment. And again, it limits any sort of disparity as those grades get higher and higher. There's a limitation there on the disparity of income as well. So as we moved through those 150 benchmarks, we kind of looked at those, and so there was, 126 of those benchmarks were more than 5% behind the market at the 75th percentile. 20 of those classifications were what I would say, in the average and, within that two standard deviations of the mean, so to speak. And then there were 4 classifications that were actually more than 5% ahead of the 75th percentile. And so we took those into consideration when we adjusted all things. And again, you can see what we've done as far as the actual classification and the titles and what we merged and how we sort of reshaped things so that there is the opportunity to go forward and make job families and things of that nature going forward. Barring any questions, that is all I have for you all going forward.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Yes. Yes.
Well, that's a lot of information. You have a 25-year kind of time frame on this. I remember, didn't we go through this? I mean, not as extensive as this, but it was a classification study about 4 years ago, didn't we?
We did. It was actually 5 years ago that it was implemented.
And I remember then going through kind of it wasn't, I don't think, well, we did talk about compression and all that back then, but it was mostly a classification study where we reclassified people.
It was both. It was absolutely both a pay and classification study. The philosophies are different. I mean, a lot has changed in the labor market in the last 5 years. So, I mean, you really can't compare the two because we're in completely different labor markets.
Yeah.
But that one was truly a comprehensive pay and classification plan as well.
Okay, so are we gonna be doing this every 4 years or so? I mean, I guess it depends on the economy.
Yeah, so from what I understand, that they're gonna give us the tools to help maintain our pay plan better. One of the most significant differences between this and what we have done historically is changing from the 50th percentile to the 75th percentile. I think, in my opinion, that by making that change will better prepare
Right.
us to stay competitive in the future. Especially with our close neighbors such as the county and St. Pete, it'll help us be more competitive with them, whereas at the 50th percentile, we have not been able to keep up.
Yeah, we've been
actually
losing a lot of people.
Yeah, significantly behind. So I think that'll make a difference, that along with some of the implementation tools to help keep us moving in a positive manner that will help us maintain our market rate.
Well, I'm all for that. I mean, the complaints I hear, well, one is when you move somebody up, that's why I like the hybrid thing, because then all of a sudden they lose, the history, and they don't get anything more for being, getting an advancement. They aren't getting paid anymore, and that's a complaint. But and I know a lot of city employees don't live in Clearwater because they can't afford it. So I'd really like to see more of them be able to afford to live here in Clearwater. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you for that report, and the PowerPoint was fantastic that's attached. I appreciate that. I would just say that, this seems to be, it's a long time coming as far as us being able to recruit and retain quality employees. But this, to make the city competitive and address salary concerns by staff, is a cumulative effect over multiple city managers is being addressed now, is a good thing. But I think it's really interesting, what I find really impressive is in that PowerPoint presentation that there was positive staff feedback on culture, environment, schedule, benefits, especially our health center, that this is a phenomenal place to work. And the negative feedback was mostly concerning salaries, which is what we're absolutely addressing and committed to doing. That collective feedback from 897 people, not just anecdotal feedback from people who might say something, a conversation, is really meaningful, and I think it says a lot about the leadership of the city and our departments and how we operate. I think it's a lovely place to work, and I haven't heard a lot of complaints from employees, but it's long overdue to reward them or compensate them fairly. And so I'm all in favor of this going forward, and appreciate Jennifer from spearheading this.
Other questions, comments? Anyone else? So if we implement the hybrid plan, we're looking at 5.9 million? And you are comfortable with that?
Yes, absolutely. We have
Okay.
worked closely with the finance department in terms of how this will impact our long-term plan. I know that during our one-on-ones and through the budget conversations, we have shared that with you. So is there an impact on our plan? Absolutely. But based on our priorities and what we're trying to accomplish with our strategic plan, we are recommending that we take this, and that we approve the plan as is recommended. But yes, there are funds available in it, but it'll impact our long-term plan for sure.
Sure. So, and another thing I'd like you to address, I've heard some people, not a lot, but a few, say, oh, we're spending way too much money on consultants, and we should have done this ourselves. This would have been a huge task to try to do in-house, would it not?
Absolutely, and we have done, because the labor market being what it is, HR has done the last several years, 2 or 3 to be exact. They could answer more precisely, but they have done it in-house, where they take on, going through, collecting the pay and classification plans from other municipalities and doing this work. So, they do it in-house as well. It is normal. Everybody's doing them. I mean, I was just at our City Managers Consortium on Friday, of which I think 90% of the people in the room are conducting pay studies right now, just because of the labor market being what it is.
Okay. Anything else on this?
If I just may add one other thing, I want to say thank you very much to the HR department. They did a tremendous amount of work on this, and working through all the all the different scenarios, and their blood, sweat, and tears are all over this plan as well. So thank you to them and to Finance and Budget for being a good partner with us on this.
Well, I know there was a ton of communication efforts made so that the employees were aware of this and that they would
Absolutely.
participate. So yes, outstanding job. Okay, this is,
I would echo that as well, sir. Just
Yes.
from my vast experience dealing with other organizations, that your HR department is doing a phenomenal job here, has been incredibly involved and responsive as well. So it's not the norm. It's really good. So I've enjoyed this project a lot.
great to hear. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Have a good
This
afternoon.
is available for consent. What's your pleasure? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Parks and Rec, 5.1, please.
Approve a purchase order to Benoni Associates in an amount not to exceed $140,100 to provide professional services in connection with providing GIS services.
Good afternoon, Mayor,
Afternoon.
council members. Art Cater, Parks and Recreation Director. The item before you today is the approval of a purchase order to provide GIS services and engineering services for the mapping of the Clearwater Municipal Cemetery, which is located at Myrtle and Lakeview, the corner of that. The cemetery was established in 1877, long before when I was born, by the way. Well, everybody calls me, the old timer around here, so in any event. The city took operations, though, over in 1915 when it was incorporated. The city's clerk's office is responsible for all the records of the cemetery, and Parks and Recreation is responsible for the maintenance of the cemetery. To get a clearer picture at the cemetery and to update the records, staff's recommending the mapping of the cemetery with some modern technology. This will aid staff in determining the actual location of where everyone is buried, as well as all the vacant lots that are out there and various unmarked graves that we have in the cemetery. Benoni will provide survey services, ground penetrating radar services, GIS data collection, and a mapping services. Field maps will then be provided by Benoni, which will give the city the ability to locate the inventory. That's any lots that are left over, although I don't believe we're selling any more lots. And plot locations and attributes. The database will be able to tell you the date that it was inspected, the section, road, type, name, date of birth, date of death, epitaph, language, notes, and even pictures. So you can go in and look at any one of those interment sites and get all that information from the database. The information will assist the staff in several departments in the city, and it'll give us a more accurate historical record of what currently exists at the Clearwater Municipal Cemetery. I'm available, as well as Rosemarie, as well as Dan Mayer, to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions or comments?
I'm putting them all in there, come on.
Any questions or comments? If none, consent?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 5.2, please.
Approve a purchase order to Benoni Associates in an amount not to exceed $99,500 to provide professional services in connection with the design repairs at Precinct 8.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Matthew Anderson, Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm going to give you a little brief history on Pier 60. It was damaged fairly extensively during Hurricane Idalia. We actually had water over the deck at the end of the pier. We have video of it from the storm. A lot of the decks were damaged to the point where we had to close it immediately following Idalia. We had Benoni and Associates come out and do a structural assessment and give us the ability to get it open while we made the major plans to fix the overall issues. This right here will allow us to hire them for the professional services to give us the long-term repairs. We have two types of repairs. We've got Hurricane Idalia damage, and then we also have maintenance issues that need to be addressed as well. So this will allow us to essentially get the pier back to where we can get a lot longer life out of it, along with making those permanent repairs from Idalia. If you have any further questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I had a question on the appropriation code and amount. Do we have leftover money from Hurricane Irma? It says,
At the bottom.
Irma, it says, and transfer $1,222,000 $12,567 of government revenues from program blah, 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 Hurricane Irma. So did we have money left over from Hurricane Irma that we can apply here?
Jerry Evans, Finance Director. I don't have the details, but we have actually money left over from multiple hurricanes that that reside in an emergency operations 181 special program that's available for funding.
Wow, okay.
Basically, the general fund expenditures that we incur are reimbursed by FEMA years later.
Okay.
So that money, when it comes back, is put into a special program for future needs.
And that account right now is over $1 million?
I believe it's, yes, probably, possibly over a couple million, but I can get you that information.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Nice tie, by the way.
And one thing about this too, we'll have these repairs broken into Adalia issues and then maintenance issues, and then we will be looking for FEMA reimbursement on the Adalia, which when it comes in, it will most likely be in another budget year, which will continue this on, so.
Okay.
Anything else on this one? Consent?
Nope. Yep.
Thank you. Please, 6.1, please.
Approve a purchase order to Pinellas Regional Information Management Enterprise for the personnel and operating expense of Prime.
Afternoon, Mayor, Council.
Afternoon.
Eric Gandy, Chief of Police. So, for many years, there was a goal to get all public safety, police, fire, EMS on one record management system and one computer-aided dispatch system. A lot of effort went into making this happen, and this is merely a payment to Prime that was agreed to in the interlocal agreement that was signed off on in 2022. The distinction here is that fire and EMS backed out of the project early on, and then they're back in the project. They had their own reasons, obviously, for not being included, but the county asked us to include them last fiscal year. So this is merely a payment. We have funding available for it in our capital improvement budget, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? None? Consent?
Yep.
Thank you. 6.2, please.
Authorize a purchase order to Allen J. for the purchase of 8 police pursuit vehicles.
So this is merely an ask for additional police pursuit vehicles. We added 7 new officers, and to put them in vehicles, we had to make this purchase. For the 7, the 8th is funded by Clearwater Christian Academy as part of the agreement to provide them with a school safety officer. The delay on these cars is what's significant these days. I mean, we're looking 12 to 18 months for delivery time on vehicles. And in this particular item, we have an upfitting cost associated with it as well, about $10,000 per vehicle to put lights and siren and cages and things of that nature. I'll be glad to answer any questions related to these vehicles or the procurement process.
Questions, comments? Consent? Thank you very much. Public Works, 7.1, please.
Approve multiple easement vacation requests for property owners. The City of Clearwater is affecting real property, 112 South Osceola Avenue.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council
Good
members.
afternoon.
Robert Casmer, Public Works Engineering. The item before you today is to vacate multiple abandoned city easements. Okay. The parcel in question is 112 South Osceola Avenue, which is also known as the Old City Hall, which is now in development with these easements needing removal for title purposes. The abandoned easements reflect a relocated pumping station and former alleyway. All no objection letters have been received with proper advertising completed. City staff have reviewed and approved this request. Any questions, please?
Any questions? I'm going to read the ordinance. Do I need to read the ordinance here? No? Not today.
Thursday.
Next time. Okay. I'll learn one of these days. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Planning, 8.1, please.
Approve amendments to Community Development Code Sections 6-109 and Appendix A, Downtown District and Development Standards.
Good afternoon, Jamie Lopko, Planning and Development. Before we get started, staff wanted to ask council to remove one of the pieces of these amendments.
Section 6-109, we have concern over some unintentional consequences that may come from that, and would like a little bit more time to look at it before we bring it back before you. But we would like to move forward with the remaining parts of this ordinance and then come back to you on Thursday night with an amended motion and ordinance.
Okay, any questions or comments? No, okay, thank you. 8.2, please.
You want to read it?
Do you have to read this one?
No, not today.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
Did you want any information on the two amendments we're keeping?
Can I, yeah,
yes, go ahead.
can I ask, what are some of the concerns and, yeah, why do you want to have that 6.109? What are the concerns?
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. I ask that we pull this back because I feel like there could be some unintended consequences with it, that it could be applied in a much broader fashion than we intended. So we'd like an opportunity to try to refine the criteria a little bit so that we don't have those unintended consequences.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, now 8.2, please.
Did you want any information on the couple amendments that were left on there, or are you good?
Do you want information on the amendments that are left on there?
Can you summarize?
Sure. We're amending section C301, the table for our amenities incentive pool for downtown. Just clarifications. We had two residential incentives that people were thought maybe they could both be used on the same property. We're clarifying it's one or the other. And then also for streetscaping, there were some streets out there like the DOT streets. They're not going to let us do streetscaping on their streets, so we clarified what streets that was available on. And then lastly, we added governmental uses to the flexibility standards for downtown, just because some government buildings tend to not be standard office buildings, so there could be some unique characteristics that we would like flexibility for.
Okay, thank you. All right. Information technology, 9.1, please.
But there's another planning item.
I thought that's-
Overview of the city's implementation of the Live Local Act.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought that's what she was discussing. I got lost there.
Just a moment. Good afternoon, Lauren Matsky, Planning and Development. You've been provided with a detailed memo in your agenda package, which I'm going to overview today. So the Live Local Act was enacted by Senate Bill 250, that's one that we're dealing with. It was enacted by Senate Bill 102 earlier this year. It's a pretty lengthy bill, but I'm only focused on the zoning preemptions that were included. The bill was written in very broad terms since it applies statewide, so many cities have found it necessary to provide interpretations of the Act's provisions so that residents and the local development community understand how it fits into the local zoning framework. Planning and Development worked very closely with legal on the preparation of the memo that was attached. So there's two types of projects that are eligible for the Live Local entitlements: 100% multifamily rental or mixed-use rental that dedicate at least 65% of the floor area to residential. Both require at least 40% of the units to be set aside as affordable for 30 years. The Act defines affordable as 120% of area median income or below. It does not set any other requirements regarding a mix of affordability. And I'd like to point out that projects in residential zoning districts are not eligible for the Live Local entitlements. Neither are projects comprised of single-family dwellings. So the Live Local Act entitles eligible affordable housing rental projects to uses, density, and height entitlements. It states that eligible projects must be approved administratively, meaning without public hearing. Eligible projects may be located in zoning districts where attached dwellings or mixed-use projects are not currently allowed, and the city may not require a rezoning first. The Act entitles eligible projects to the same density as the highest residential density allowed in the city where residential development is permitted, and projects are permitted the same building height as what is currently allowed for a residential or commercial project within 1 mile of the proposed development, or 3 stories, whichever is higher. So in the next few slides, I'll talk about what this means using Clearwater's information. So the Act says eligible projects may be located on parcels zoned for commercial, industrial, or mixed use. The city's mixed-use zoning districts are the Tourist District, Downtown, and US 19. The Commercial District and Industrial Research and Technology are also eligible for the Live Local projects. This map shows the distribution of those sites across the city. Collectively, these zoning districts comprise about 22.5% of the city's land, and as you notice, larger maps and additional information are provided in the map. From a density perspective, Live Local projects are entitled through the Act to a density of 75 dwelling units per acre, which is the highest permitted in the city in the downtown core. The maximum height of a project will depend on where the parcel is located. It'll be necessary for staff to identify all the zoning districts within that 1 mile buffer and then determine which is the maximum permitted height through an administrative process, and that will be what that particular parcel is entitled to through the Act. So this slide shows a sample project, sample property zoned commercial on MLK Jr. in Lake Bellevue. The parcel is within 1 mile of a smidge of the downtown district, the South Gateway Character District, so this particular parcel could build up to 55 feet on this parcel. As I mentioned previously, the Live Local Act grants the density, use, and height entitlements, and they must be approved administratively. So the city has 2 different application types that are considered or can be approved administratively. The first is a minimum standard development, which does not require a separate site plan approval. Those projects can come in and pull their building permits. The second is a flexible standard development that requires a site plan be reviewed by the Development Review Committee prior to them making a recommendation to the Community Development Coordinator and that person making a final decision. That would be our Planning and Development Director. So I think this slide illustrates why the memo for how local implementation is to be done was really necessary, because every municipality has different zoning regulations, and Clearwater's code, being a performance-based code, is also a little bit more unique than others. The Act permits the attached dwellings and mixed-use projects in zoning districts where the city doesn't already necessarily have standards in place for those uses. And we also don't want to penalize Live Local projects or these eligible projects if otherwise they could utilize our flexibility in an administrative level. So this slide is really just intended to be a high-level summary. There's detailed tables in the memo that would be available to everyone, explaining by zoning district what application they would need to submit, what their lot size, minimum lot size setbacks would be, what flexibility is available administratively, and any other details like parking. Speaking of parking, the Live Local Act allows municipalities the option to decrease required parking for eligible projects within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop, and that's not defined in the Act, nor is it defined in our code. So currently, though, projects utilizing the city's existing affordable housing bonus may provide less parking, so this is carried forward for Live Local projects. In most of the eligible districts, attached dwellings are required 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Affordable units provided within an eligible project within the 1/2 mile of a major transit stop would be allowed to provide only 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Any market rate residential uses would be required to provide the 2 spaces or what the code otherwise requires. And similarly, if it was a mixed-use project, the non-residential uses would have to meet their minimum standard for parking. Also consistent with the city's bonus, when that vehicular parking number is reduced, there is a requirement to provide long-term bicycle parking storage. So the state legislature has passed several other bills in the last several years related to affordable housing. It started with, it was House Bill 1339 in 2020. The statutes have been amended twice since then, including some changes through the Live Local Act, separate from the pieces that I've just explained, which were all new, so the existing provisions were also amended. Cities and counties are granted the authority or additional discretion regarding projects that provide a lower overall percentage of affordable housing units within a project. That's set as little as 10%. It does not require those units to be rental or multifamily. And what it says is cities may permit these other affordable housing projects in the commercial or industrial zoning districts without future land use map amendments or rezonings. But it does not require the administrative processing as the other portion of the act does. The city has utilized our comprehensive infill redevelopment project process for these types of situations. Providing affordable housing is actually one of the possible criteria to meet to be able to utilize comp infill. And so going forward, we'll continue to use that in the commercial and industrial districts as it is consistent with those regulations. So in closing, I'd like to point out that implementing the act furthers two of council's strategic priority areas, the economic and housing opportunity and community well-being. And of course, I've gone over a lot, so if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions or comments? Yes.
Lauren, I had a question about that parking slide. I think it's in a few about the that one, right. So 1.25 car parking spaces per affordable unit. So let's say they build it within a half mile of a major transit stop, and it's mixed income. 40% of the apartments are 120% or below, and the other 60% are market rate. So, and then market rate residential has normal parking requirements. So is that developer going to assign parking spaces to market rate apartments versus,
that would ultimately be their prerogative. It helps, sometimes we're told we require too much parking, sometimes we're told we don't require enough. Ultimately, in downtown, we've taken the avenue of trying to let the market decide to a certain degree. They may find that they need more parking and they don't necessarily have to request a reduction, but the management of who parks in those parking spaces is not this. They would just need a nice Excel spreadsheet to do the math for them.
Right, okay, just wondered about that.
Anything else? Yes.
Just a comment. I know Ms. Maskey pointed out that she's giving this presentation from the planning perspective, which I thought was excellent, but as she said earlier, there are a lot of implications of the Live Local Act that go beyond even what you're hearing today. It is a very dense bill that has a lot of changes, some of which are on the tax side, and so could potentially change different ways that we approach affordable housing projects going forward because of the ad valorem exemptions that are being created potentially for some of those projects. So just want to point out that there's a lot of implications that go beyond this, and it's going to be a lot of strategic things that we're going to have to think about as we look at each of our affordable projects going forward.
Do you think there are going to be tweaks made in this legislative session on that, and what do you anticipate?
I think there will probably be some tweaks. This was a priority of Senate leadership last year, so I think the gist of it probably will remain intact. I have heard from different communities there are different concerns across different cities and counties than we might have here in Clearwater. For example, Ms. Maskey explained the commercial, zoning district and how the affordable housing must be allowed in commercial districts, must be allowed in the tourist district, must be allowed in the industrial district. Those are changes that, candidly, I'm not sure will have a ton of impact on us, just because the cost of building, for example, affordable housing on the beach is expensive. So I'm not sure in the real world there's going to be a whole lot of impact. But on the other hand, there have been news articles about Pasco County, how they are really concerned about this because as Pasco is becoming more and more of a bedroom community, they desperately need the commercial and industrial tax base to actually pay for public safety services. And so if they have Pasco's land mass starts getting occupied by residential in places where they desperately need commercial and industrial, they're not going to have the resources they need to actually pay for their critical infrastructure for their residents. So I think that impact on them, for example, would be much higher than it is in a city like Clearwater. So I do think there's probably going to be tweaks this year, but it'll be interesting to see how receptive the legislature is to making some of those changes, or whether they try to carve out certain communities who may be affected disproportionately. You know, not to get off topic, but that's one of the points that we often make at the Florida League of Cities, which is that when the legislature is passing statewide legislation, it might land very differently from city to city or county to county. And so oftentimes, in my experience, a lawmaker who sponsors a bill might be trying to solve a problem that they're dealing with locally, which is understandable, but they might not see the impact it could have 100 miles away or 200 miles away in a very different city or a very different county. And so I don't know what the appetite's going to be to make some of these changes, but there's a lot to unpack.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I would just add that, and some of that is the reason why our approach has been to utilize a policy memo. I mean, ultimately, the statute says these districts, this height, this density, but all the other nuts and bolts could be modified over time, so this allows us that ability versus bringing forward code amendments and then new code amendments and new code amendments. So,
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Information technology, 9.1, please.
Authorize a purchase order to Hewlett Packard Enterprise for the equipment lease of desktop, laptops, and tablet computers.
Mayor, Council, Jared Barden, IT Manager. We are approving this for an 18-month term as the state renewed its agreement with HP, and the contract will expire on June 30th, 2025. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments on this item? All good? Consent? Thank you. 9.2, please.
Authorize a purchase order with Verizon Wireless for cellular and mobile data services.
Mayor, Council, City Manager, Dan Mayer, IT Director. We're bringing this before you this year with a significant increase for our cellular connectivity. We have several projects that are impacting our purchasing. One is the asset management investment, where we will add units in the field for field workers. We're also replacing, where possible, radios with cell phones, and that is increasing costs. Most importantly, Microsoft has changed their protocols for logins. So traditionally, most people are using texting for verification for their multi-factor. That uses an SMS protocol, which is not encrypted. So Microsoft is moving to an application which they put on smartphones for people to sync and use their multi-factor. This is encrypted. We can issue phones without cell service, and as we go through the departments, we will do that. We feel there are other benefits in times of emergency or for critical communication that we could also benefit from cell phones in the hands of employees. So we've anticipated this growth over the next 24 months and have included that in the purchase number.
Any comments or questions on this item? Nope. Okay, consent?
Yeah.
Thank you. Public Utilities, 10.1, please.
Approve supplemental work order 1 to CHA Consulting for the Water Reclaimed Water Program.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Brown. I'm the Deputy City Engineer with Public Works Department, but I'll be presenting today on behalf of the Public Utilities Department. This request is to approve supplemental work order 1 for the Water Reclaimed Water Program. The Water Reclaimed Water Program includes assessment, evaluation, design, and construction engineering and oversight services for the water and reclaimed water, all bundled into one program. Back on November 11th, 2019, Council approved the initial allocation. We think the program has been very successful. We've managed to get a lot of work done, and so I'm here today asking for some additional funding. With that, I'd like to put up a little presentation for you all to see. All right, so as I said, this is the Water Reclaimed Water Program. There's a little bit of an agenda for today. You've seen a couple of these slides in the past. We have other programs. This one, remember, this is water reclaimed water. We have one for sewer, the wastewater collection system. That one's different. We have one for lift stations. That one's different. This is just for water, reclaimed water. So up here you see these are all the different facilities that the Public Utilities Department operates and maintains. And today, again, we're just talking about water and reclaimed water. CHA, as you can see there, they are our program consultant. They perform studies, designs, and construction oversight. And I'll add, it's not just construction oversight, they actually help us manage the contracts themselves with the contractors, which is very helpful. Here are some studies that they've done so far. Wasn't planning on going into too much detail on them specifically, but just to acknowledge that they're doing some studies for us. This one I thought was going to be a little bit easier to see for you all. Maybe it is in your packets there. But this is all the design and construction that they've done to date, and I'm going to break this up and try to show it to you in little bits and pieces if we can. The pink didn't show up as well as I thought. So water main improvements, so there you go. We've done 36 different areas. 55,000 linear feet is either replaced or will be replaced in the future. In terms of reclaimed water, there you go. There's been a lot of work up on North Beach, as you all may know. And then off to the right there, 5,000 linear feet at an estimated cost of $7.5 million. And then some construction oversight. And so here you can see these are different valves and water service lines, water mains, and this particular firm, CHA, helps us oversee all of that construction. And so kind of to wrap up a little bit here, they've got, again, studies, design, construction oversight. The original value was 4.175, and as I said, we've authorized 3.8 to date. There's still about almost 2 years left in the program, and so we're hoping that we can get some more work done. And so I'm here today asking for the additional 4.5 million, and well, I guess I have one more slide, I'm sorry. So there you go, 55,000 linear feet. There's a lot of work. We've gotten a lot of work done. This is all construction. This isn't design. This isn't the studies. This is all construction. It's a lot of good work. They've been very, very helpful. There you go. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes.
Sure. All right, so I have a question about probably right there, Island Estates.
Yeah.
I was talking to the guy that does, I think, a lot of your underground piping, and he said he's bidding on a project on Island Estates for water line. He said they're going to start that. I don't know, he told me a lot of it's going in all up and down. I was thinking that probably we would have paving done in April, but it sounds like this is going to be tearing the roads up for a while before paving's done. Do you know anything about schedule on that?
Yeah, what I can tell you is our Public Utilities does want to replace the water lines out on Island Estates. Obviously, they want to be conscientious of our residents that live out there. And so we have, part of this program, there's actually a reclaimed water contractor that we could utilize. We engaged them. They could have gone out there sooner than later, but their price was pretty high and their timeline was longer than we wanted to wait. And so we worked with our contractor and found a specialty contractor is going to be doing pipe bursting down the main line of Island Estates. The intent behind that is A, well, it's a little bit cheaper. B, they're going to give us a shorter duration, but most importantly to you all, it's going to minimize disruptions to traffic. So pipe bursting, you're able to basically, you have a pipe underneath the surface, you pull a brand new pipe right through the old pipe. It's already got the alignment, you just drag it right through. You've got to maintain services while you're doing it, but it makes it less disruptive to traffic. That time frame, they said, is about a year, but it hasn't begun yet, so it's still a ways out there.
Okay, so you're not going to be digging up like the roads. Can paving be done before that's done, or that has to be completed?
Well, the plan was we're working with Public Works Department because they had plans to go in and do resurfacing throughout the area. And so we knew with the Public Utilities work, we wanted to be cognizant of that and try to get in there and try to get whatever work done first. So from my understanding, we're intending on waiting just because there could be some open cuts here and there that become necessary due to whatever subsurface condition we encounter. And that way we'd be able to save the paving for last.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, Jeremy. I had a question on the slide that says water main projects construction oversight. I was just wondering what that collection of black and blue dots by Coachman Ridge Homeowners Association is. It looks like hydrant replacement. Are they all out there?
Let's see if I can go back to the slide that you were looking at.
So there it is. See that little blip there? That little black thing.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, what's the question?
Why do we have all this, that's hydrant replacement? Is that what that is there?
No, that's actually, there is water mains and service lines in that area. I'm sorry, I think those are valves, if I'm mistaken.
Okay, all right.
It's an apartment complex, it might be a condo, I forget, and we're gonna be replacing a number of
Okay,
those.
it just stood out like, wait, what's going on right there? It's not anywhere else throughout the city?
Yeah, it's just, there's just a condensed area.
Okay. And then I had another question. Oh, this was on the second slide. This isn't what your purpose is today, but when you mentioned that 73 lift stations, I just wanted to know if you have any, where are we with our understanding of the condition of our lift stations and the number and condition or monitoring of the private lift stations?
Yeah, well, I don't want to speak too much for public utilities as I'm no longer
Okay.
working for them. I do know these 73 that you're talking about, those are operated and maintained by public utilities.
Mhm.
I think weekly, they go out and inspect and maintain. Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, Mike Flynn, Public Utilities Assistant Director. So the lift station, we're handling that separately through the lift station master plan. Actually, ironically, CHA is also managing that project for us as well. They completed lift station assessments of the public lift stations on the electrical portions of them this past week. They're going to be moving forward and looking at some of the other maintenance aspects of it. As far as the private systems, they're working with us on that as well. That's a little bit longer lead time, so that's going to take some time for us to work through that process and defining what that will look like. There are other local municipalities that do have some systems in place. We're using that as part of the evaluation criteria as we look at them.
Great. Okay. Thanks. I just remember that in wake of hurricane stuff that, yeah, just need to know. Thank you. And then I did have a question about the money. So this is my understanding from following the legislative text. So in 2019, we entered an agreement with Reese Engineering for a 6-year contract for this work at a cost of $4,175,000 that would take us through 2025. Now, at the end of 2023, you're saying we spent all of the 6-year money and we need more money to continue the work, but we need double that. We need $4,500,000 for the last 2 years of the contract. So we spent all the money that was allocated for 6 years in the first 4 years, and now we need double that. You know, we need another. I mean, is this just how it's going to go as we proceed to go through the city and do our work? Because who planned for 4.175 that would take us through 6 years, and it only lasted 4?
We're happy that we're here today.
Okay.
We
You're churning
anticipated
through the work.
$4.1 million. These programs are large. They take time to get up and running. Once they do get up and running, they start rolling downhill. And right now, we're rolling downhill, is how I'd respond to that. And so we're asking for some more funds so we can execute some more projects.
When you say you're rolling downhill, does that mean you're reaching completion?
I'm sorry, I just meant that the ball's rolling.
Well, that we're making progress. We're making progress.
Now the ball's
but-
rolling, so it's easier
Okay.
to execute.
Okay, so there was no intent in 2019 that was, the 4.175 million was going to complete everything we needed?
That was the intent.
It was the intent?
Yes.
And now we've even doubled it?
Now we're doing a lot more work, and so we're asking for some
Okay.
funding, yes.
But I think for the work that was presented in 2019, we've completed that. Now we're adding to the work. That's why we're adding the money.
The work was never always predefined.
It wasn't?
I mean, there was our master plans, there was the work we knew of back in 2018, 2019 when we were pulling the program together. But then there's all the work that's become unknown to us from 2019 until today.
Okay,
So
okay.
those are additional elements that now we know about them. Hey, we've got a method, we've got tools to accomplish this. Let's go ahead and get to work.
Got it. Okay. Just wanted to know that differential from what was approved for a 6-year plan versus even more for the last 2 years. That, will we be able to spend 4.5 in 2 years working around?
It's not necessarily suspended. So right now we have the 3.8 encumbered. We're not going to wait until the last day of the contract and then say, here, take $2 million worth of work. That is not the intention at all. This is just, though, I would guesstimate any work that's not assigned probably maybe a year before the contract ends. They probably won't execute any more work unless it's some emergency that has to be done. But the intention is to use the money. If it's not used, it won't be spent. And again, this is all time and materials.
It goes up, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you. Consent? Thank you. 10.2, please.
Approve utility work by highway contractor agreement between the Florida Department of Transportation and the City of Clearwater for the FDOT utility relocation at State Road 60.
Good afternoon. Mike Flanagan, again, Public Utility Assistant Director. The item before you today is for utility work by highway contractor agreement, UWHCA, between Florida Department of Transportation and the city. FDOT is planning to construct a pedestrian overpass at State Road 60, Courtney Campbell, where the city has a 6-inch sanitary sewer main, an 8-inch potable water main, and a 6-inch reclaimed water main. This agreement allows FDOT to relocate these mains that conflict with the proposed construction of a pedestrian overpass at Courtney Campbell. This item furthers City Council's strategic plan to achieve higher performing government by maintaining public infrastructure through systematic management efforts. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Consent? Thank you. 10.3, please.
Authorize a purchase order to American Backflow Products and Main LP and Test Gauge LLC for the supply of backflow devices and parts.
Yes, the item before you today is the purchase of backflow preventers. Backflow preventers safeguard potable water by assuring that water flows in one direction from the water plant. Florida Administrative Code requires the installation and maintenance of these devices. The contract allows for public utilities to repair, maintain, and replace these devices. The item furthers Council's strategic plan to achieve higher performing government by maintaining public infrastructure throughout systematic management efforts. PU is asking you to authorize a purchase order to American Backflow Products Company, Corin, Maine, and Test and Gauge, Florida, in the not-to-exceed amount of $535,000 with the option of 2 one-year renewals. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Consent? Thank you. Solid Waste 11.1, please.
Approve a purchase order to Toter LLC for the purchase of refuse and recycling containers in the annual not-to-exceed amount of $200,000.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members. Kervin Sanemi, Solid Waste Director. Today, item number 23-143, Solid Waste is seeking approval for a purchase order for Total LLC of Stateville, North Carolina, for purchase of refuge and recycled containers not to exceed the amount of $200,000 with 2 one-year renewal options. On September 20th, 2023, procurements issued an invitation to bid TB 6023 refuge and recycling containers for the purchase of new and unused residential plastic refuge and recycled containers. The city received 2 bids on October 2023. Total LLC was considered the lowest, most responsible bidder in accordance to the specifications. Any questions?
Any questions? Consent? Thank you. 11.2, please.
Approve a purchase order to Smith Industries, DBA Smith, doing business as Smith Fence Company for the fence removal and replacement of the entire solid waste complex perimeter.
Councilmember, item number 23-159, Solid Waste is seeking approval for a purchase order to Smith Fence of Clearwater, Florida for fence removal and replacement of the entire solid waste complex perimeter fence, not to exceed the amount of $131,207,000. This is the piggyback cooperative purchase. The solid waste existing perimeter fence is about 30 years old and has some security vulnerability. This is a piggyback purchase for Pinellas County, bid number 23-0054 TBITB for services such as fencing, gate operators, handrails, and was awarded to Smith Fence Company, a corroborated contract through February 14, 2026. Any
Questions or comments? Consent? Thank you. City Clerk, 12.1, please.
Approve the mayor's appointment of Vicey Gully to the Clearwater Housing Authority to fill the remainder of an unexpired term through September 30, 2024. Council members, Mr. John Duran was filling that position, and he has moved out of state and is now making way for new membership. and the CHA has identified Ms. Gully as the appropriate applicant, and the mayor has identified that individual.
She'd be a great one for the job.
Yep. Goes back a long time with me. All right, thank you. 12.2, please.
Appoint Kimberly DeVito to the Public Art and Design Board to fill the remainder of an unexpired term through February 29, 2024. Council members, Charlene Harrison was filling that position. She unfortunately has taken on a position with the City of St. Pete in the same category, so the organization has identified Ms. DeVito as the individual that they would like to have appointed to the board.
Good with that?
Yes.
Consent?
Yeah.
Thank you. City Attorney, 13.1, please.
Mayor, 13.1 through 13.4 are all second readings, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on any of the second readings? If not, let's go down to the city manager verbal reports.
Nothing, sir.
Okay, city attorney verbal reports?
Nothing, sir.
Okay. Council discussion items, I believe this one, the first one is, we're not quite ready for, or are we?
No, regarding the PSTA, we are not ready for this item. Staff has been working together with PSTA, so I'm not sure if it'll be at the second meeting in December, if it'll be in the January rotation.
Okay. 16.2, Councilmember Albritton.
Okay, I wanted to put this on the agenda in the work session so we could discuss this. We kind of did last council meeting, and I think Councilman Beckman brought up if we wanted to do a resolution for PSTA because of Cheney's strikeout bill. And at the time, it was changing daily almost. She was trying to get it where she could get it passed through committee. So I held off, but anyway, last week I went to the local delegation, legislative delegation, and I was there with Rose and some other people. A lot of board members from PSTA were there, and they did vote. I think the vote was 6-3 to pass it. So that was their first committee pass, and then now it'll go to Tallahassee and go through the committees up there. Three senators were on that committee. One senator voted against it. That was Roussan, and I believe I think he will probably kill it once it gets in Tallahassee. But I think it's time for Clearwater to take a stand on this now. And so what I'm asking the council is to consider writing a resolution having legal resolution in opposition of this bill. Even though Clearwater got put back on it, there's still things on the bill that I think are problematic, and problematic for Clearwater. One of the ones is they want to, she wants to make, let me go through the bill here just real quick. I got some things highlighted. They want to strike out to regulate other operators of public transit in Pinellas County transit area. Well, I don't want to see anything affecting the trolley, and I don't want to see anything affecting waterborne transportation. So that in itself would be a good one, I think, for Clearwater to say, hey, we're not for this. But then it goes on. It's got a lot of redundant things that we already do that she's stating in here. The other one is evidently she has several places here about lane elimination. I guess she's against what happened down on St. Pete Beach, but she didn't want to have any pursuit of rail. And we may have an opportunity in the future, even though Greenlight failed, to buy a CXS rail line that goes right next to our transit center. So I think that it would be wise for Clearwater to vote for a resolution in opposition of this. We have other municipalities, Dunedin, let's see, Largo and Dunedin have 2 confirmed resolutions in opposition. St. Pete and Oldsmar are voting on theirs next week. And I can tell you, there's so many cities that are eliminated from this. I can tell you there's a resolution coming from all of them. So Brad Miller's here. If you have any questions, he's here to answer it. But I'd like to have a discussion to see if we're on board with doing that.
Sure. I mean, at first glance, when I looked at it, of course, I made some phone calls to make sure we had a seat. So I thought that it really wasn't going to be a problem for us if we had a seat. Now, but does this, Mr. Margolis, as Mr. Albertin said, put either the trolley or other transportation services in jeopardy based on the language in this bill? And also, does it preclude light rail or any rail from being a possibility in the future?
As Councilmember Albertin said, the language of the bill certainly has been changing, significantly. The version that was discussed most recently by the delegation is quite different than the version that was initially presented. And the final version that gets voted on by the legislature may be very different than the version we have today. As it stands today, however, there is a prohibition against PSTA potentially acquiring rail, as Councilmember Albertin pointed out, so I think that's true. As far as the impact on the trolley, that's something I'd have to really think about based on the language of the current draft of it. I think that's probably up for some discussion.
And the same with the ferry?
Also, the ferry, is something we have to think about because they have a strike-through in the current draft that talks about eliminating the rail. And so that was Councilmember Albert's point about CSX. As far as the ferry, that's something that's up for some discussion, I think, based on the language. I don't see anything specific to the ferry, but that said, it certainly is a bill that is, I would say, more limiting in terms of some of the things that PSTA can do, whether it's on the CSX rail side, whether it's on the lane elimination side. There's a lot of tendrils of this, and so if the council is interested in a resolution of some kind, the question for the council will be, what would you like it to say? In other words, does the council oppose this bill in its entirety as currently drafted? Because, as the mayor pointed out, as drafted, we actually keep our seat, and not only keep our seat, but we actually improve our representation proportionally, because we will become one of 11 instead of one of 15. And so is the council in opposition to us improving our representation because it would reduce representation of some other cities? That's a question for council to discuss and debate. So I think the question for council to consider is, do you want me to draft a resolution in opposition to this version of the bill in its entirety, or are there specific aspects of it, such as the CSX rail portion, or the structure of the board, or the lane elimination, or other aspects that the council would like us to focus on in the resolution, or either one or neither?
So my thought as the PSTA representative is PSTA is a public service transit organization. It's not a privatized transit organization that has goals, trying to represent return on investment and all that. We have to be, everybody has a stake in Pinellas County and the PSTA. And the way that they're leaning, I think, for what they've got written here is more of a privatized service. Not that it's going to be. They're going to still have, a smaller board. But I know that I just hate seeing that. I think everybody has a say-so in PSTA, and I don't want to see any restrictions put on it. So I would say I would just oppose the bill in its entirety. It's going to change anyway. And then, just to say we're not for it.
Again, I like the increased representation, but I don't like some of the other parts that you talked about. Is there any downside in your mind, city manager, for us doing this? I know previously you thought there might be, but maybe that's moot now.
Yeah, I know that we had some proposed legislation that we were looking for support on. With us not having that, I don't think there's that issue anymore.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Beckman?
I find it interesting, you phrasing it increased representation. I mean, it's maybe proportionately, but it's certainly not being a good partner to our surrounding communities. And so I get nervous about having state appointments to our local transportation board. They don't live here necessarily, they don't know our community, and so, yeah, we might be one of 11 versus one of 15, but we got people who sit on the board who aren't even here. I would rather have our community partners who live in Pinellas County as part of the board, being able to make those decisions. And so I'm not pleased with the makeup of the board proposal.
I don't know that they're going to appoint people from out of the area. I mean, that's not a given. I think they're going to appoint, if they appoint people, it's going to be people that are local. In my opinion, that's what they normally do. You don't appoint somebody from Tallahassee to serve on a local board.
But the governor has appointed people from out of different areas on these other boards that he's taken over with New College and Disney and all that. They don't live in those areas.
I think that's apples and oranges. I don't think that's appropriate here. But, I understand your concern. I don't know that, well, I won't get into it any further. Yeah.
Good. It just, to that point about the bill changing, frequently. And so it's important to make sure that we're talking about the same draft of the bill because it is changing, so often. The current draft of the bill contemplates an 11-member board, and it is broken down as follows. It is 4 members of the county commission, meaning Pinellas County Commission, right? So that's 4 right there. The 5th member is from the city of St. Pete, who will be city council member. The 6th member would be city council member from Clearwater. Then, that's 6 out of 11. So then the remaining 5, you have one of them who is combined from the municipalities of Tarpon, Safety Harbor, Oldsmar, Dunedin, Bel Air, and Bel Air Bluffs. It must be one of their elected officials. Then that process repeats itself for some of the other cities, so there must be an elected official from either Largo, Seminole, South Padina, Gulfport, Kenneth City, and Pinellas Park. That's kind of one seat. And then the process repeats itself again, where there must be an elected official from Bel Air Shore, Indian Rocks Beach, Indian Shores, North Reddington, Reddington Beach, and a few of the smaller islets. Then they go on to say that there will be a member, and again, this is just the current draft, keeping in mind that it's fluid, right? But the current draft says there will be a member appointed by the Senate President or the Speaker of the House, but that person must come from the combined municipal governing bodies of Tarpon, Safety Harbor, Oldsmar, Dunedin, Bel Air, and Bel Air Bluffs. Then, and they go on to say, this appointee shall be a citizen appointee. So there will be, to the mayor's point, a local person appointed from those communities in addition to the elected representative. But it is an appointment that is being made from Tallahassee. So who's it going to be?
It's going to be a local person.
So
It'll be a
will
local person, but will be made from Tallahassee. Is that good, is it bad? I don't know. And then that process repeats itself for the Senate President's appointments. The Senate President's appointment would be someone who's a citizen appointee from Largo, Seminole, South Pasadena, Gulfport, Kansas City, and Pinellas Park. So certainly a very different board composition than the 15-member board that is set up today. Whether it's good or bad is, above my pay grade.
But all local county residents.
Yes.
That's better to know that, yeah.
In the current draft.
In the current draft.
I mean, I'll yield to what the board feels, and Mr. Albritton is our representative, so certainly he has some expertise in this. I think the way it's written as far as representation is actually good for us, but the rest of it, I don't like, the other stuff you brought up. But again, that's up to you guys. You guys tell me what you want to do, and I will follow the lead.
What do you recommend, Dave?
Mr. Margolis, do you have a recommendation whether we just write about the specific things or throw the whole thing out?
Well, I mean, I try hard to stay clear of the public policy debates, especially when I may have different council members who have different perspectives.
Go for it.
So I try to duck and cover when it comes to those decisions that are above my pay grade. I can certainly see good policy arguments both ways on this. I mean, there's a lot to break down, right? Because there's the structure of the board, which is one part of it, and then there's some of the powers and responsibilities of PSTA, which is the second part of it. I think that an argument in favor of the current draft of the bill is that it does increase Clearwater's proportional representation. We would become 1/11th of the board instead of 1/15th of the board, and that would be more in line with the population that we actually serve. If anything, I think we actually deserve more than 1/11th of the population, because we're right in the middle of Pinellas County. We have the PSTA Intermodal Center that's going to be at the gateway of our downtown. We have the Jolly Trolley partnership, we have the ferry partnership. So candidly, in some ways, I'm not sure the bill goes far enough, if it was my opinion, in terms of Clearwater's representation. That said, I also understand the point that Councilmember Albright raised about wanting to be good partners, for neighboring municipalities. I do think this bill, certainly preserves more of their input than what was seen in the earlier draft of the bill. But is it enough to make, Dunedin happy? Probably not. If I was Dunedin's city attorney, I'd probably have a different view on this. So there's no perfect answers on that. Just policy decisions that.
So this would have never really, I don't think it would have come up if we didn't have the Sunrunner and we didn't have the free rides on the Sunrunner for a year, which we had some unintended consequences there. And, we aren't T-BARTA, we're PSTA. Really, things are done pretty much the right way. We're going to all electric buses. We're giving free rides to veterans. Now, I know that was called out in here now, it's okay to do that, but no more free rides to anybody else. Well, we have programs throughout the year that try to get people. We don't have a problem, and this bill is a solution in search of a problem, which we don't have. And if you were there at the delegation meeting and listened to everybody that got up in support of PSTA, it was pretty formidable. And they all said kind of the same thing. Why? Why do we have this? So my suggestion as one of, the 5 up here is just oppose it in toto. Just say, there's no reason for this, we're in opposition to this. And then it's going to change again, and it would probably be killed, but at least we're showing the rest of the communities that we're in support, of working together.
So what's your pleasure?
I defer to David.
Okay, sounds like you have a consensus. I'll go along with it, but I think having 1 of 11 is much better than the current situation, but I'll go along with it.
Yeah, the whole limiting of the rail and trolley and ferry, that concerns me a lot. However, I'm wondering if we kill it completely, are we going to go back to 115? It's actually to our detriment, especially when I feel like we're always a redhead stepchild. So I'm kind of liking the way the board is being designed now, but I can't support the resolution at this point as it is right now, as of today. So you've had your consensus.
Okay, so I guess we're opposing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to be clear, so what I'm hearing is that will I be drafting a resolution to oppose the current draft of the bill in its entirety?
That's correct, yes.
And so what I'll probably do then is, because in any resolution, we're going to have to spell out why we're doing it, right? There's a bunch of whereas clauses and things like that. So I'll probably go back and select some of the points that have been raised here on the dais when it comes to our relationships with our neighboring communities, as well as Councilmember Albright's point about PSTA being an award-winning program, and essentially, although I might not phrase it exactly this way, the solution in search of a problem. So I'll use that as kind of our baseline for what I'll be drafting, and then bring that back for the council's consideration.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Anything else on that? Okay. Tampa Bay Estuary Program update from Councilmember Beckman.
Yes, so I wanted to give you an update on, we had that discussion about artificial turf, and I was having that Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board meeting the next day, And so we had given them, the board, the policy board had given them direction to study this. So it was, well, but it was, July, August, early September. And so any studies wouldn't come forward until about 2025 or so. An allocation for the study would most likely be in 24-25 budget, and any report would probably come in 2025. So that's some update on that. But I also have I have additional updates from the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board. They do have legislative priorities as well that I wanted to share with you. But last Friday, I participated in a coastal resilience boat tour of the southern part of Tampa Bay and our estuary, and this was sponsored by the National Wildlife Federation, and the intent was for elected officials to get a firsthand look at the coastal challenges impacting Tampa Bay and showcase the opportunities and solutions to bolster our region's resilience and to protect our environment, our health, and our economy. And so where I went last Friday, they also have another boat tour this Friday. And so I forwarded that invitation to you all if you want to go. Again, it's for elected officials. There were about 10 of us or so on last Friday's one, and it was really very informative. And then part of our discussion on that tour of the estuary and the vulnerable shoreline was on pollutants in our water, and I shared with some of the leaders there, the leaders and the scientists that were on the boat, our recent conversations about artificial turf. And they had a suggestion that perhaps the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council is best positioned to coordinate any kind of countywide efforts or collaboration about ordinances related to artificial turf and the pros and cons, where the Tampa Bay Estuary Program could be a great resource for study and scientific opinions, but this Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council would be well positioned for that. And I just wondered your thoughts on that. Lena, you serve on that board, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Has it ever come up in that board?
Not as of yet, but it's something I'd like to think about, and the meeting, I think, is next week, so I don't have a problem bringing that up.
That'd be good. See if they have any thoughts about it. Have they done anything comparable about coordination between our county and municipalities related to something like that?
I'll look into it.
That'd be great. And then the Tampa Bay Estuary Program's legislative priorities, I just wanted to share with you a couple of them. Certainly they want to continue or expand state funding for the estuary programs, including and collaborate with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and the water management districts. They want to establish a statewide long-term funding program with sufficient funds for competitive local cost share projects for estuary restoration, and establish or upgrade and improve stormwater and wastewater facilities and infrastructures. We're already doing that. Jeremy's working on all that. Restore critical coastal habitats and maintain protections for existing habitats. These are things like oyster reefs, salt marsh, living shorelines, tidal and freshwater wetlands, and coastal uplands. And I think that's really important to think about, especially those living shorelines. We had a discussion, Councilmember Albritton, about mangroves and trimming mangroves. We were at part of those living shorelines. And what they said was important about those windows that we had asked about along the Courtney Campbell is that we keep the cover of the window, so it's not just a chunk of a block, but that there's an over part of it. So that was interesting. There's a real goal, and this is like astronomical numbers, but to really improve the quality of the Tampa Bay estuary and improve tidal circulation and natural estuarine flow patterns, and is to raise the causeways, that they really should have been constructed as bridges, that low Courtney Campbell Causeway and those low causeways across the bay are incredibly detrimental to the flow of water and what we're seeing with loss of seagrass and sea life and all that stuff. So certainly that's a partnership with federal government, for billions of dollars to do that, but you should be aware that that's really needed. They want to plan and implement coastal resiliency adaptation strategies, monitor environmental progress and estuary change, convert septic to sewer or septic to advanced septic technology, and then maintain locally recognized fertilizer controls. And I know part of our priorities are to maintain home rule, which I think that falls under, but you should know that I think we should have a show of support with some kind of a resolution for our support for our local ability to improve our water quality in Clearwater and Tampa Bay, and discuss the resolution that our EAB unanimously recommended at the last council meeting to the council, that expressed support for local fertilizer usage parameters, and Pinellas County has expressed their support by having it as one of their top legislative priorities, and Tampa Bay Estuary Program does too. So if we want to do that, I know it falls under our home rule, but if we want to consider following the guidance of the EAB to have a resolution in support of that, home rule related to fertilizer use, I think that would be good. And then that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Any other new business today?
Oh, I have new business.
Okay.
So are we in agreement that we can draft a resolution in support of home rule for control, local control for fertilizer use? Because that's what the EAB has asked for. I think we should answer to our Environmental Advisory Board's recommendation. Again, the county has it as their legislative priority. Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board has it as a priority. And I think we could it would give our local legislators, another tool or resolution from their municipality as they go forward in Tallahassee.
Mr. Margolis, any input on that?
Not really. That's up to council. I mean, we can, if that's the direction the council would like to go. Just, I'll make the general observation when it comes to resolutions and just political capital in general, which is that it's a finite currency. And so you only have so much to spend. And so just keep in mind, I'm not saying one thing should be a priority over another, but both the clerk and I serve on committees with the Florida League of Cities, and oftentimes, what we're talking about are what are the things that are most important, because nobody gets everything they want in a representative democracy. So the question's going to be, does this rank up there, as something that is a very high priority for the council? And if so, then by all means, we should do a resolution. So it just kind of depends on what your priorities are, because if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority.
Exactly.
So just
Okay.
to think
So
about.
don't we have is it a Pinellas County rule, or is it Pinellas County, that we can't use fertilizer between May and, October?
You can't get to October 1st. Yeah.
And we don't want to be preempted from that, that's all. We want to keep it.
You mean preempted by the legislature?
Right, because they're looking at that this year.
I need to think about it. I need to really look at the priority list and really, I have to think about it. If I'm going to bump something up from my priority list, I'd like some time to think about it.
Okay.
I'm kind of with you on that. I mean, I think it's a good thing because of red tide and the blooms and everything we have that maybe other areas don't have. I mean, the Gulf Coast has areas specifically, especially Tampa Bay. So,
Again, keep it local. I mean, because it really, it affects us. And I would ask, so if we talk about political capital, which I can absolutely appreciate, does that mean like one resolution per session? What does that mean?
I don't think there's any magic number. I think it's just more thinking about, everyone has to varying degrees, different level of comfort or relationships, with our delegation, as they should, right? I mean, like that, our delegation is representing our constituents in our cities. But things happen very quick in Tallahassee as a result of having a part-time legislature and just a lot of structural aspects of our state constitution. So that means that because things happen so quickly during legislative session, oftentimes local advocacy groups, whether it's the Suncoast League, whether it's the Florida League, which is even full-time devoted to it, whether it's cities, counties, we're all at times either playing defense or at least having to prioritize because there just isn't enough time, or political will to accomplish everything you want. That's never going to happen. And so I think has to be some level of prioritization. So, for example, like with the Florida League of Cities, Clerk and I were at their conference, was it last week? Yeah, it was last week. Days all start to run together after a while. But last week, and so I'm on the Finance and Taxation Committee, and we were talking about what is our priority. So their rule for the Florida League of Cities is that we could adopt as a committee one policy position, and one priority. One policy position and one priority, because they understand that there's just only so much, that can be accomplished within that compressed time frame. So the committee had to discuss it, debate it, and see, okay, what rose to the level as saying that we're going to send the signal to our lawmakers that this is really the most important thing for us. The best thing you can do to help support us, is this. And so then, like, my committee ended up voting on that. And so, for example, like this year, my committee ended up voting to say that preserving enterprise fund transfers was a top priority for finance and taxation. For example, like our gas company dividend, water and sewer, things like that. And so, not to get off topic, but just those are things that we had to prioritize. Ad valorem exemptions was also something that was a big priority of the committee, that I was on. And how can we make sure that we don't have a bunch of tax cuts that are passed in Tallahassee that are actually tax shifts, from some of our taxpayers to other taxpayers. So all of that kind of comes back to this, which is that there's no rule that says you could pass, 50 things
Right.
if there are things that you care about. But when it comes to directing our efforts, the clerk will need to give direction to our lobbyists in terms of where their efforts are devoted, and then individually, because each of you have different relationships with our lawmakers, where would you like to focus? The one comment I will make is that we are much more effective when we're all rowing in the same direction. And so if instead of having individuals go off doing their own thing, it is much better to have the conversation, in my opinion, on the dais, and for council to send a unified message, whether that's PSTA, whether it's fertilizer, whatever the issue is. I do think the council is a lot stronger when you stand together. Just my 2 cents.
So let me ask this, because my suggestion would be to call our legislators, talk to them about it. And if I can say when I'm talking to them, it's not just me, but we had a discussion and everybody seems to be on board. I know that, I'll just give you an example. When I was in my first term, something passionate came up to me. I think it had to do with the 5G cell towers. And I wanted a resolution to ask the federal government if they were bad for you or not, because nobody could tell you. And I was getting a lot of emails from people saying, I'm going to grow a third eye because I got one across the street. So I got really shut down by the mayor on that and said that we just don't hand out resolutions. And we just handed one out today, so handed 2 out in the same meeting. I probably not, but I am kind of on board with you, and I'll talk to my legislator about it. And if everybody feels...
And that's my experience. I mean, my experience in the past was, I don't think resolutions do anything. I think you call or you meet with your people that you have relationships with. That's what really moves the ball forward, in my experience. Now, I don't know what the rest of your experience is, but I think resolutions get thrown in the trash can half the time. I just don't think anybody pays attention to them. But if you call and you articulate and you have more than one person call and you're in lockstep, like Councilmember Alberton said, and like the city attorney said, I agree with, keep it local and keep it the way it is because of our environment here. So if we want to make phone calls and go from there, I'm all for that.
Well, I think the verbal consensus is fine. So I could say, look, we had a discussion on the dais. We all are in support of this. We have, to oppose preemption is part of our legislative priority, which I think covers this anyway, which is good. So I appreciate that. And then we've also got the power of the EAB making their statement, so.
Okay, yes.
You know, like when I try to prioritize it, there's so many things that I consider, and I call it like triaging. It's not only what's the most important to me, but what needs my support the most, meaning it's already faltering or it doesn't exist yet. Like for this already exists, right? So we have to weigh all that stuff, right? Is there other entities that are fighting that are just as powerful for that? Perhaps maybe my attention could go to something else that needs more help. So it's not, when I look at priorities, it's not what's the most important to me, but there's like a lot of other things to consider.
Okay. Anything else for new business?
Yeah. New business. So I had a couple things on new business. I'd like to discuss sometime in the first quarter of next year, so certainly not next month, and our planning department is gone, so that's good. Another thing on their plate. Certainly, not next month, but hopefully in the first quarter of next year, to have a discussion up here about our sign ordinance. There's a common thread between our small businesses, business owners in Clearwater, that our sign ordinance is overly restrictive. And recently I spent nearly 4 hours just on a few blocks of Drew Street, both sides, talking to small business owners. And there is general frustration with the limited ability to advertise their businesses and to increase foot traffic from those who are traveling on our streets. And so I think it's time to look at. I understand there was a number of years ago we tightened up our sign ordinance to get rid of some clutter. That's fine, but I think we need to revisit it in today's world and our small business owners. So hopefully we can do that sometime in the next quarter. And then before that, I'd like to, at our December 19th council meeting, because we don't have a work session for the next meeting in December, but I'd like to have a discussion of the public use of the Landings property. So it's come to my attention that there may be a circumstance where there could be a change to the zoning of this property that would not need to go to a referendum. And so there's a little nuance here, but I think the public needs to be fully informed of this, because I was just recently informed of this as we go forward. There's nothing, on the horizon, but it's a change that it's a situation that I've become aware of that I want the public to be aware of as well. So hopefully we can that Mr. Margolis can have a brief update on December 19th meeting maybe about that.
Okay, anything else? One thing I'd like to get on the board is, and I don't want to get into the discussion now, but from the state, where they're on Drew Street. We were told they were going to study and they're going to come back with us with plans. We've heard nothing. I'd like to hear that before I'm done, March 19th or whatever. I mean, it's been silent. And
Well, Whit Blanton had actually, we had met with him earlier this week on something, or last week on something else, and he had mentioned that data should be coming relatively quickly.
okay, well, I'd like to have a presentation at a work session maybe in January or February, whatever works, on where they are and what it looks like and what the alternative and the plans and everything, and go from there. Okay? All right, and finally, a lot of good events this last weekend. They did the Reindeer Lane at the Countryside Rec Center, and Sean Beasley and a bunch of volunteers and city staff did a great job. It was tremendously attended. In fact, I went just as mayor, and I liked it so much, I went and picked up my five-year-old grandson and brought him over, and he had a great time. So it was a wonderful event, and volunteers did a terrific job, and just another great event by the city. All right, good meeting. We will see everybody on Thursday evening. Thank you.